I don't know why I keep doing this to myself.
What do you mean? It's fun. You don't have fun?
I do have fun, but it also causes me great physical pain.
It's not real pain. Come on.
No, I might be developing an ulcer.
Yeah, okay. You wish you were developing. No, actually, you don't wish you were developing an
Why would I
ulcer.
wish that?
I don't know. Maybe you enjoy. Maybe you are. Wait, what was the quote again? There's a quote from this game a friend made that's really funny. Yeah, find it eventually. It goes, maybe I am want pain and I sabotage myself because I am scared to be happy. Does that
Oof.
apply to you, Melon? Does that apply to you, Melon?
I gotta go.
I'll give it a few minutes and wait for more people to come in. Surely people enjoy the fun. Surely.
Surely they'll come crawling back.
Where did that bring you? Back to me. Oh, Yoko's gonna be late, huh?
Boo.
Boo.
I mean, I don't mind waiting.
Yeah, it's fine. And there's Joy. We could probably just start.
Right on time.
All right. I should probably get water, but whatever, it's fine. We'll get water later. So last time, what happened last time? They had the meeting and then they split up, and then yeah, they had the meeting and then they split up because they were like, "Oh no, we're a bunch of soloists, etc." And so I forget if they no, they didn't accomplish anything except be all like, "Oh yeah, I'm a solo player. I ain't need no comrades or anything." And so here we are. I think after the basement, a few hours later, the remaining slots on the scoreboard began to fill up one after another in rapid succession, not with avatar names, but with IOI employee numbers. Each would appear with a score of 5,000 points, which now appeared to be the fixed value for obtaining the copper key. Then the score would jump by another 100,000 points a few hours later, once that sixer had cleared the first gate. By the end of the day, the scoreboard looked like this. I recognized the first Sixer employee number to appear because I had seen it printed on Sorrento's uniform. He'd probably insisted that his avatar be the first to obtain the copper key and clear the gate, but I had a hard time believing he'd done it on his own. There was no way he was that good at Joust, or that he knew war games by heart, but I now knew that he didn't have to be. When he reached the challenge he couldn't handle, like winning at Joust, he could just hand over control of his avatar to one of his underlings. And during the War Games challenge, he probably just had someone feeding him all the dialogue via his hacked immersion rig. Once the remaining empty slots were filled, the scoreboard began to grow in length to display rankings beyond 10th place. Before long, 20 avatars were listed on the scoreboard, then 30. Then over the next 24 hours, over 60 Sixer avatars cleared the first gate. Meanwhile, Ludus had become the most popular destination in the Oasis. Transport terminals all over the planet were spitting out a steady stream of beaters who then swarmed across the globe, creating chaos and disrupting classes on every school campus. Hold on a sec, actually. The Oasis Public School Board saw the writing on the wall, and the decision was quickly made to evacuate Ludus and relocate all of its schools to a new location. An identical copy of the planet, Ludus II, was created in the same sector, a short distance away from the original. All students were given a day off from school, while a backup copy of the planet's original source code was copied over to the new site, minus the Tomb of Horrors code Halliday had secretly added to it at some point. Classes resumed on Ludus II the following day, and Ludus was left for the Sixers and Beaters to fight over. News spread quickly that the Sixers were encamped around a small flat-topped hill at the center of a remote forest. The tomb's exact location appeared on the message boards that evening, along with screenshots showing the force field the Sixers had erected to keep everyone else out. These screenshots also clearly showed the skull pattern of the stones on the hilltop. In a matter of hours, the connection to the Tomb of Horrors D&D module was posted to every single beater message board. Then, it hit the news feeds. All of the large beater clans immediately banded together to launch a full-scale assault on the Sixers' force field, trying everything they could think of to bring it down or circumvent it. The Sixers had installed teleportation disruptors, which prevented anyone from transporting inside the force field via technological means. They also stationed a team of high-level wizards around the tomb. These magic users cast spells around the clock, keeping the entire area encased in a temporary null magic zone. This prevented the force field from being bypassed by any magical means. The clans then began to bombard the outer force field with rockets, missiles, nukes, and harsh language. They laid siege to the tomb all night, but the following morning, both force fields remained intact. In desperation, the clans decided to break out the heavy artillery. They pooled their resources and purchased two very expensive, very powerful antimatter bombs on eBay. Wait, on eBay? What the fuck? They detonated both of them in sequence, just a few seconds apart. The first bomb took down the outer shield, and the second bomb finished the job. The moment the second force field went down, thousands of beaters, all unharmed by the bomb blast due to the no PvP zone, swarmed into the tomb and clogged the corridors of the dungeon below. Soon, thousands of beaters and Sixers had crammed into the burial chamber, all ready to challenge the Lich King to a game of joust. Multiple copies of the king appeared, one for every avatar who set foot on the dais. 95% of the beaters who challenged him lost and were then killed. But a few beaters were successful, and at the bottom of the scoreboard, listed after the high five and the dozens of IOI employee numbers, new avatar names began to appear. Within a few days, the list of avatars on the scoreboard was over 100 names long. Now that the area was full of beaters, it became impossible for the Sixers to put their force field back in operation. Beaters were mobbing them and destroying their ships and equipment on sight, so the Sixers gave up on their barricade and they continued to send avatars into the Tomb of Horrors to farm copies of the Copper Key. No one could do anything to stop them. You know, there's no PvP, but somehow, like, property damage is allowed? Like, is that not PvP? I really don't get this. There's
All you need to do is declare your force field a corporation, because corporations are people.
Oh no. The day after the explosion in the stacks, there was a brief story about it in one of the local news feeds. They showed a video clip of volunteers sifting through the wreckage of human remains. What they did find couldn't be identified. Wait, what the? Oh. It seemed that the Sixers had also planted a large amount of drug manufacturing equipment and chemicals at the scene to make it look like a meth lab in one of the trailers had exploded. It worked like a charm. The cops didn't bother to investigate any further. The stacks were so dense around the pile of crushed and charred trailers that it was too dangerous to try to clear them out with one of the old construction cranes. They just left the wreckage where it was to slowly rust into the earth. As soon as the first endorsement payment arrived in my account, I bought a one-way bus ticket to Columbus, Ohio, set to depart at 8 the following morning. I paid extra for a first-class seat, which came with a comfort chair and a high-bandwidth uplink jack. I planned to spend most of the long ride east logged into the Oasis. Once my trip was booked, I inventoried everything in my hideout and packed the items I wanted to take with me into an old rucksack. My school-issued Oasis console, visor, and gloves, my dog-eared printout of Anorak's almanac, my Grail diary, some clothes, my laptop, everything else I left behind. When it got dark, I climbed out of the van, locked it, and hurled the keys off into the junk pile. Then I hoisted the rucksack and walked out of the stacks for the last time. I didn't look back. I kept to busy streets and managed to avoid getting mugged on the way to the bus terminal. A battered customer service kiosk stood just inside the door, and after a quick retinal scan, it spat out my ticket. I sat by the gate reading my copy of the almanac until it was time to board the bus. It was a double-decker with armor plating, bulletproof windows, and solar panels on the roof. A rolling fortress. I had a window seat, 2 rows behind the driver, who was encased in a bulletproof plexiglass box. A team of 6 heavily armed guards rode on the bus's upper deck to protect the vehicle and its passengers in the event of a hijacking by road agents or scavengers. A distinct possibility once we ventured out into the lawless badlands that now existed outside the safety of large cities. Every single seat on the bus was occupied. Most of the passengers put on the visors the moment they sat down. I left mine off for a while, though, long enough to watch the city of my birth recede from view on the road behind us as we rolled through the sea of wind turbines that surrounded it. The bus's electric motor had a top speed of about 40 miles an hour, but due to the deteriorating interstate highway system and the countless stops the bus had to make at charging stations along the way, it took several days for me to reach my destination. I spent nearly all that time logged into the Oasis, preparing to start my new life. The first order of business was to create a new identity. This wasn't that difficult now that I had some money. In the Oasis, you could buy almost any kind of information if you knew where to look and who to ask, and if you didn't mind breaking the law. There were plenty of desperate and corrupt people working for the government and for every major corporation, and these people often sold information on the Oasis black market. My status as a world-famous beater gave me all kinds of underworld cred, which helped me get access to a highly exclusive, illegal data auction site known as Elite Hackers Warehouse. Jesus Christ. And for a shockingly small amount of money, I was able to purchase a series of access procedures and passwords for the USC, or United States Citizen Registry database. Using these, I was able to log into the database and access my existing citizen profile, which had been created when I enrolled for school. I deleted my fingerprints and retinal patterns, then replaced them with those of someone deceased, my father. Then, I copied my own fingerprints and retinal patterns into a completely new identity profile that I'd created under the name Bryce Lynch. I made Bryce 22 years old and gave him a brand new social security number, an immaculate credit rating, and a bachelor's degree in computer science. When I wanted to become my old self again, all I had to do was delete the Lynch identity and copy my prints and retinal patterns back over to my original file. Once my new identity was set up, I began searching the Columbus classifieds. Wait, what the? Did I fuck up? I fucked up. Once my new identity was set up, I began searching the Columbus classifieds for a suitable apartment and found a relatively inexpensive room in it. In an old high rise hotel, a relic from the days when people physically traveled for business and pleasure, the rooms had all been converted into one room efficiency apartments, and each unit had been modified to meet the very specific needs of a full time beater. It had everything I wanted: low rent, high end security system, and steady, reliable access to as much electricity as I could afford. Most important, it offered a direct fiber optic connection to the main Oasis server vault, which was located just a few miles away. This was the fastest and most secure type of internet connection available, and since it wasn't provided by the IOI or one of its subsidiaries, I wouldn't have to be paranoid about them monitoring my connection or trying to trace my location. I would be safe. I spoke with a rental agent in a chat room, and he showed me around my virtual mock-up of my new digs. Place looked perfect. I rented the room under my new name, paid 6 months rent up front. That kept the agent from asking any questions. Sometime, Sometimes, during the late hours of the night, as the bus slowly hummed along the crumbling highway, I removed my visor and stared out the window. I'd never been outside of Oklahoma City before, and I was curious to see what the rest of the country looked like. But the view was perpetually bleak, and each decaying, overcrowded city we rolled through looked just like the last. Finally, after it felt like we'd been crawling along the highway for months, the Columbus skyline appeared on the horizon, glittering like Oz at the end of the yellow brick road. We arrived around sunset, and already there were more electric lights burning in the city than I'd ever seen at one time. I read that the giant solar arrays were positioned throughout the city, along with two heliostat power plants on its outskirts. They drank in the sun's power all day, stored it, and fed it back out each night. As we pulled into the Columbus bus terminal, my Oasis connection cut out. As I pulled off my visor and filed off the bus with the other passengers, the reality of my situation finally began to hit home. I was now a fugitive, living under an assumed name. Powerful people were out looking for me, people who wanted me dead. As I stepped off the bus, I suddenly felt as though a heavy weight were resting on my chest. I was having a hard time breathing. Maybe I was having a panic attack. I forced myself to take deep breaths and tried to calm down. All I had to do was get to my new apartment, set up my rig, and log back into the Oasis. Then everything would be alright. I would be back in familiar surroundings. I would be safe. I hailed an auto cab and entered my new address on the touchscreen. The synthesized voice of the cab's computer told me the drive would take an estimated 32 minutes with the current traffic conditions. During the ride, I stared out the window at dark city streets. I felt lightheaded and anxious. I kept glancing at the meter to see how much further we had to go. Finally, the cab pulled up in front of my new apartment building, a slate gray monolith on the banks of the Scioto, just at the edge of the Twin Rivers ghetto. I noticed a discolored outline on the building's facade where the Hilton logo used to be, back when the place had been a hotel. I thumbed my fare and climbed out of the cab. Then I took one last look around and inhaled one final breath of fresh air and carried my bag through the front door and into the lobby. When I stepped inside the security checkpoint cage, my fingerprints and retinal patterns are scanned and my new name flashed on the monitor. A green light lit up and the cage door slid open, allowing me to continue on to the elevators. My apartment was on the 42nd floor, number 4211. The security lock mounted outside required another retinal scan. Then the door slid open and the interior lights switched on. There was no furniture in the cube shaped room, and only one window. I stepped inside, closed the door, and locked it behind me. Then I made a silent vow not to go outside again until I had completed my quest. I would abandon the real world altogether until I found the egg. He's never gonna touch grass. He's never touching grass. Level 2. I'm not crazy about reality, but it's still the only place to get a decent meal. Groucho Marx. Did he really say that? Or is this made up too?
It sounds Marxy, but you know,
We may
can't
never
believe anything
know.
you read.
We may never know. Arthemus, you there? Parzival, yes! Hey, I can't believe you finally responded to one of my chat requests. Arthremus, only to ask you to cut it out. It's a bad idea for us to start chatting. Parzival, why? I thought we were friends. Arthremus, you seem like a great guy, but we're competitors, rival beaters, sworn enemies. You know the drill. Parzival, we don't have anything to talk about related to the hunt. We don't have to talk about anything related to the hunt. Arthremus, everything is related to the hunt. Parzival, come on, at least give it a shot. Let's start over. Hi, Arthremus, how have you been? Arthremus, fine, thanks for asking. You? Parzival, outstanding. Listen, why are we using this ancient text-only chat interface? I can host a virtual chat room for us. Arthremus, I prefer this. Parzival, why? As you may recall, I tend to ramble in real time. When I have to type out everything I want to say, I come off less as a flibbertigibbet. I don't think you're a flibbertigibbet. You're enchanting. Did you just use the word enchanting? What I typed is right there in front of you, isn't it? That's very sweet, but you're full of crap. I am totally and completely serious. I fucked up, didn't I? So how's life at the top of the scoreboard, hotshot? Sick of being famous yet? I don't feel famous. Are you kidding? The whole world is dying to find out who you really are. You're a rock star, man. You're as famous as I am. And if I'm such a rock star, how come the media always portrays me as some unwashed geek who never goes outside? I take it you saw the SNL skit they did about us? Yes. Why does everyone assume I'm an antisocial nutjob? You're not antisocial? No! Maybe. Oh, okay, yes. But I have excellent personal hygiene. At least they got your gender correct. Everyone thinks I'm a man in real life. That's because most beaters are male. They can't accept the idea that. They can't accept the idea that a woman had beaten or outsmarted them. I know, Neanderthals. So you're telling me definitively that you're a female? IRL? You should have already figured that out on your own, Clouseau. I did. I have. Have you? Yes. After analyzing the available data, I've concluded that you must be female. Why must I? Because I don't want to find out that I've got a crush on some 300-pound dude named Chuck who lives in his mother's basement in suburban Detroit. You got a crush on me? You should have figured that out on your own, Clouseau. What if I were a 300-pound gal named Charlene who lives in our mom's basement in suburban Detroit? Would you still have a crush on me then? I don't know. Do you live in your mom's basement? No. Yeah. Then I probably still would. So, I'm supposed to believe you're one of those mythical guys who only cares about a woman's personality and not about the package it comes in? Why is it that you assume I'm a man? Please, it's obvious. I get nothing but boy vibes coming from you. Boy vibes? What? Do I use masculine sentence structure or something? Don't change the subject. You were saying you had a crush on me? I've had a crush on you since before we even met. From reading your blog and watching your POV, I've been cyber stalking you for years. But you still don't really know anything about me or my real personality. This is the Oasis. We exist as nothing but raw personality in here. I beg to differ. Everything about our online personalities is filtered through our avatars, which allow us to control how we look and sound to others. The Oasis lets you be whoever you want to be. That's why everyone is addicted. So, IRL, you're nothing like the person I met that night in the tomb? That was just one side of me. The side I chose to show you. Well, I like that side. And if you showed me your other sides, I'm sure I'd like those too. You say that now, but I know how these things work. Sooner or later, you'll demand to see a picture of the real me. I'm not the sort who makes demands. Besides, I'm definitely not gonna show you a photo of me. Why? You butt ugly? You're such a hypocrite. So, answer the question, Claire. Are you ugly? I must be. Why? The female of the species has always found me repellent. I don't find you repellent. Of course not. That's because you're an obese man named Chuck who likes to chat up young, ugly young boys online. So you're a young man? Relatively young. Relative to what? To a 53-year-old guy like you, Chuck. Does your mom let you live in that best? Does your mom let you live in that basement rent free, or what? Is that really what you're picturing? If it were, I wouldn't be chatting with you right now. So what do you imagine I look like? Like your avatar, I suppose. Except without the armor, the guns, or the glowing sword. You're kidding, right? That's a first rule of online romances, pal. No one ever looks like their avatar. Are we gonna have an online romance? Cross his fingers. No way, Ace. Sorry. Why not? No time for love, Dr. Jones. My cyber porn addiction eats up most of my free time, and searching for the Jade Key takes up the rest. That's what I should be doing right now, in fact. Yeah, so should I. But talking with you is more fun. How about you? How about me what? Do you have time for an online romance? I've got time for you. You're too much. I'm not even laying it on thick yet. Do you have a job? You still in high school? High school? I graduate next week. You shouldn't reveal stuff like that. I could be a Sixer spy trying to profile you. The Sixers have already profiled me, remember? They blew up my house. Well, it was a trailer, but, they blew it up. I know. I'm still freaked out about that. I can only imagine how you feel. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Bon appetit. What do you do when you're not hunting? I refuse to answer any more questions until you start reciprocating. Fine. Quid pro quo, Dr. Lecter. We'll take turns asking questions. Go ahead. Do you work or go to school? College. Studying what? It's my turn. What do you do when you're not hunting? Nothing. Hunting is all I do. I'm hunting right now, in fact, multitasking all over the goddamn place. Same here. Really? I'll keep it on the scoreboard then, just in case. You do that, Ace. What are you studying in college? Poetry and create.
Oh no, Tuna, no. Oh no, Tuna, no.
Poetry. Look, at least Wade had the cojones to fake a comp sci major. Oh my god. Can we get any more stereotypical? Come on. Can why couldn't she be in this has been fairly disappointing. Poetry and creative writing. Makes sense. You're a fantastic writer. Thanks for the compliment. How old are you? Just turned 18 last month. Oh. I mean, you're also playing a gotcha game, so you're not really a stereotype anymore. You kind of broke that stereotype doing that, so. Doomed. Just turned 18 last month. You? Don't you think we're getting a little too personal now? Not even remotely. 19. Ah, an older woman. Hot. That is, if I am a woman. Are you a woman? It's not your turn. Fine. How well do you know H? He's been my best friend for 5 years. Now spill it. Are you a woman? And by that, I mean, are you a human female who has never had a sex change operation? Jesus. That's pretty specific.
That's incredibly
Answer.
specific.
Answer the question, Claire. I am and always have been a human female. Have you ever met HIRL? No. You? No. No. Do you have any siblings? No. You? Nope. You got parents? They died. The flu. So I was raised by my grandparents. You got parentage? Nope. Mine are dead too. Kinda sucks, doesn't it? Not having your parents around. Yeah, but a lot of people are worse off than me. I tell myself that all the time. So, are you and H working as a duo? Oh, here we go. Well, are you? No. He asked me the same thing about you and me, you know. Because you cleared the first gate a few hours after I did. Which reminds me, why did you give me that tip about changing sides in the joust game? I felt like helping you. Well, you shouldn't make that mistake again, because I'm the one who's going to win. You do realize that, right? Yeah, we'll see. You're not holding up your end of our Q&A, goof. You're like 5 questions behind. Fine. What color is your hair? IRL. Brunette. Eyes? Blue. Just like your avatar, eh? Do you have the same face and body too? As far as you know. Okay. What's your favorite movie of all time? It changes. Right now, probably Highlander. You've got great taste, lady. I know. I have a thing for evil, bald, bad guys. The Kurgan is too sexy. I'm going to shave my head right now and start wearing leather. Send photos. Listen, I gotta go in a few minutes. Romeo. You can ask me one last question. Then I need to get some sleep. When can we chat again? After one of us finds the egg. That could take years. So be it. Can I at least keep emailing you? Not a good idea. You can't stop me from emailing you. Actually, I can. I can block you on my contact list. You wouldn't do that though, would you? Not if you don't force me to. Harsh. Unnecessarily harsh. Good night, Parzival. Farewell, Arthurimus. Sweet dreams. Chat log ends. I kind of want to rinse my mouth after that. Jesus.
Are we having fun?
Yes, I'm having tons of fun. I'm having tons of fun. So much fun. Nobody can tell me I'm not having fun. Nobody will tell me I'm not having fun because I'm having fun. So much fun. I started emailing her. At first, I showed restraint and only wrote her once a week. To my surprise, she never failed to respond. Usually, it was with just a single sentence saying she was too busy to reply, but her replies eventually got longer, and we began to correspond a few times a week at first. Then, as our emails grew longer and more personal, we started writing each other at least once a day, sometimes more. Whenever an email from her arrived in my inbox, I dropped everything to read it. Before long, we were meeting in private chat room sessions at least once a day. We wa- we played vintage board games, watched movies, listened to music. We talked for hours, long, rambling conversations about everything under the sun. Spending time with her was intoxicating. We seemed to have everything in common. We shared the same interests. We were driven by the same goal. She got all of my jokes. She made me laugh. She made me think. She changed the way I saw the world. I never had such a powerful, immediate connection with another human being before. Not even with H. I no longer cared that we were supposed to be rivals, and she didn't seem to either. We began to share details about our research. We told each other what movies we were currently watching, what books we were reading. We even began to exchange theories and discuss our interpretations of specific passages in the almanac. I couldn't make myself be cautious around her. A little voice in my head kept trying to tell me that every word she said could be disinformation and that she might just be playing me for a fool. But I didn't believe it. I trusted her, even though I had every reason not to. I graduated from high school in early June. I didn't attend the graduation ceremony. I'd stopped attending classes altogether when I fled the stacks. As far as I knew, the Sixers thought I was dead, and I didn't want to tip them off by showing up for my last few weeks of school.
What is this like Eon Saikai or whatever it's called.
I know
You know
exactly
what I
what
mean.
I do exactly
You
what
know
you're
what I'm
talking
talking
about.
about.
I do exactly what you're talking about. That's the worst part. I knew exactly what we were talking about.
Uh,
Missing finals week wasn't a big deal since I already had more than enough credits to receive my diploma. The school emailed a copy of it to me. They snail mailed the actual diploma to my address in the stacks, which no longer existed, so I don't know what became of it. When I finished school, I had intended to devote all my time to the hunt. But all I really wanted to do was spend time with Arthur. When I wasn't hanging out with my new online pseudo girlfriend, I devoted the rest of my time to leveling up my avatar. Beaters called this making the climb to 99 because 99th level was the maximum power level an avatar could attain. Arthur and H had both recently done it, and I felt compelled to catch up. It actually didn't take me very long. I now had nothing but free time. And I had the money and the means to fully explore the Oasis, so I began to complete every quest I could find, sometimes jumping 5 or 6 levels in one day. I became a split-class warrior mage. As my stats continued to increase, I honed my avatar's combat and spellcasting abilities while collecting a wide array of powerful weapons, magic items, and vehicles. Arthur and I even teamed up for a few quests. We visited the planet Goondocks and finished the entire Goonies quest in just one day. Artie played through it as Martha Plimpton's character, Steph, while I played as Mikey, Sean Astin's character. It was entirely too much fun. I didn't spend all my time goofing off. I tried to keep my head in the game. Really, I did. At least once a day, I would pull up the quatrain and try once again to decipher its meaning. The captain conceals the J key in a dwelling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected. For a while, I thought that the whistle in the third line might be a reference to the late 60s Japanese TV show called The Space Giant, which had been dubbed in English and rebroadcast in the United States in the 70s and 80s. The Space Giant, called Maguma Taishi in Japan, featured a family of transforming robots who lived in a volcano and battled an evil alien villain named Rodak. Halliday referred to the show several times in Anorak's almanac, citing it as one of his childhood favorites. One of the show's main characters was a boy named Miko who would blow a special whistle to summon the robots to his aid. I watched all 52 ultra cheesy episodes of the Space Giants back to back while wolfing down corn chips and taking notes. But then, when the viewing marathon was over, I still wasn't any closer to understanding the quatrain's meaning. I'd hit another dead end. I decided Halliday must be referring to some other whistle. Then, one Saturday morning, I made a small breakthrough. I was watching a collection of vintage 80s cereal commercials when I paused to wonder why cereal manufacturers no longer included toy prizes inside every box. It was a tragedy, in my opinion. Another sign that civilization was going straight down the tubes. I was still pondering this when an old Captain Crunch commercial came on, and that was when I made a connection between the first and third lines of the quatrain. The captain conceals the J key, but you can only blow the whistle. Halliday was alluding to a famous 70s hacker named John Draper, better known by the alias Captain Crunch. Draper was one of the first phone freaks, and he was famous for discovering that the toy plastic whistles found as prizes in boxes of Captain Crunch cereal could be used to make free long-distance phone calls because they emitted a 2600 hertz tone that tricked the old analog phone into giving you free access to the line. The captain conceals the jade key. That had to be it. The captain was Captain Crunch, and the whistle was the famous toy plastic whistle of Phone Freak lore. Maybe the jade key was disguised as one of those toy plastic whistles, and it was hidden inside a box of Captain Crunch cereal. But where was that cereal box hidden? In a dwelling long neglected. I still didn't know what long neglected dwelling that line referred to or where to look for it. I visited every neglected dwelling I could think of, recreations of the Addams Family house, the abandoned shack in the Evil Dead trilogy, Tyler Durden's Flophouse and Fight Club, and the Lars homestead on Tatooine. No luck finding the J key inside any of them. Dead end after dead end. But you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are collected. I still hadn't deciphered the meaning of that last line either. What trophies did I have to collect? Or was that some kind of half-assed metaphor? There had to be a simple connection I wasn't making, a sly reference that I still wasn't clever or knowledgeable enough to catch. Since then, I'd failed to make any more progress. Every time I revisited the quatrain, my ongoing infatuation with Arthremis would undermine my ability to focus, and before long, I would close my Grail diary and call her up to see if she wanted to hang out. She almost always did. I convinced myself that it was alright to slack off a bit because no one else seemed to be making any progress in their search for the Jade Key. The scoreboard remained unchanged. Everyone else just seemed to be as stumped as I was. As the weeks continued to pass, Arthremis and I spent more and more time together. Even when our avatars were doing other things, we were sending emails and instant messages to each other. A river of words flowed between us. I wanted nothing more than to meet her in the real world, face to face. But I didn't tell her this. I was certain she had strong feelings for me, but she also kept me at a distance. No matter how much I revealed about myself to her, and I wound up revealing just about everything, including my real name, she always adamantly refused to reveal any details about her own life. All I knew was that she was 19 and that she lived somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. That was all she would tell me. The image of her that had formed in my mind was the most obvious one. I pictured her as a physical manifestation of her avatar. I imagined her with the same face, eyes, hair, and body, even though she told me repeatedly that in reality she looked almost nothing like her avatar and that she wasn't nearly as attractive in person. When I began to spend most of my time with Arthremis, H and I began to grow apart. Instead of hanging out several times a week, we chatted a few times a month. H knew I was falling for Arthremis, but he never gave me too much grief about it, even when I would bail on him at the last minute to hang out with her instead. He would just shrug, tell me to be careful, and say, "I sure hope you know what you're doing, Z." I didn't, of course. My whole relationship with Arthremis was in defiance of all common sense. But I couldn't help falling for her. Somehow, without my realizing it, my obsession with finding Halliday's Easter egg was gradually becoming supplanted by my obsession with Arthremis. Eventually, she and I began to go out on dates, taking day trips to exotic oasis locales and exclusive night spots. At first, Arthremis protested. She thought I should keep a low profile because as soon as my avatar was spotted in public, the Sixers would know that their attempt to kill me had failed, and I'd be back on their hit list. But I told her I no longer cared. I was already hiding from Sixers in the real world, and I refused to continue hiding that from them in the Oasis too. Besides, I'm a 99th level avatar now. I felt nigh invincible. Maybe I was just trying to impress Arthremis by acting fearless. If so, I think it worked. We still disguised our avatars before we went out because we knew there would be tabloid headlines galore if Parzival and Arthremis started showing up in public together on a regular basis. But there was one exception. One night, she took me to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show in a huge stadium-sized movie theater on the planet Transsexual. Shit. Am I allowed to say that on stream? Where they held the most highly attended and longest running weekly screening of the movie in the Oasis. Thousands of avatars came to every show to sit in the stands and revel in the audience participation. Normally, only long-standing members of the Rocky Horror fan club were permitted to get up on stage, and help act out the film in front of the giant movie screen, and only after they passed the grueling audition process. But Arthremis used her fame to pull a few strings, and she and I were both allowed to join the cast for that night's show. The whole planet was in a no PvP zone, so I wasn't worried about getting ambushed by the Sixers. But I did have a serious case of stage fright when the show began. Arthremis played a note-perfect Columbia, and I had the honor of playing her undead love interest, Eddie. I altered my avatar's appearance so I looked exactly like Meatloaf did in the role. But my performance and lip-syncing still kind of sucked. Luckily, the audience cut me a lot of slack because I was a famous beater Parzival, and I was clearly having a blast. The night was easily the most fun I'd ever had in my life up to that point. I told Arthremis afterward, and that was when she leaned over and kissed me for the first time. I couldn't feel it, of course, but it still set my heart racing. I'd heard all the cliched warnings about the perils of falling for someone you only knew online, but I ignored them. I decided that whoever Arthremis really was, I was in love with her. I could feel it deep in the soft, chewy caramel center of my being. And then, one night, like a complete idiot, I told her how I felt. It was a Friday night. I was spending another solitary evening doing research, working my way through every episode of WizKids, an early 80s TV show about a teenage hacker who uses his computer skills to solve mysteries. I just finished the episode Deadly Access, a crossover with Simon and Simon, when an email arrived in my inbox. It was from Ogden Morrow. The subject line read, "We can dance if we want to." There was no text in the body of the email, just a file attachment, an invitation to one of the most exclusive gatherings in the Oasis, Ogden Morrow's birthday party. In the real world, Ogden Morrow almost never made public appearances, and in the Oasis, he came out of hiding only once a year to host this event. The invitation featured a photo of Morrow's world-famous avatar, the great and powerful Og. The gray-bearded wizard was hunched over an elaborate DJ mixing board, one headphone pressed to his ear, biting his lower lip in auditory ecstasy as his fingers scratched ancient vinyl on a set of silver turntables. His record crate bore a "Don't Panic" sticker and an anti-Sixer logo, a yellow number 6 with a red circle and slash over it. The text at the bottom read, "Ogden Morrow's 80s dance party in celebration of his 73rd birthday. Tonight, 10 p.m. OST at the Distracted Globe. Admit 1." I was flabbergasted. Ogden Morrow had actually taken the time to invite me to his birthday party. It felt like the greatest honor I'd ever received. I called Arthremis, and she confirmed that she'd received the same email. She said she couldn't pass up an invitation from Og himself, despite the obvious risks. So naturally, I told her I would meet her there at the club. That was the only way I could avoid looking like a total wuss. I knew that if Og invited the two of us, he'd probably also invited the other members of the High Five. But H probably wouldn't show up. Because he competed in a globally televised arena deathmatch every Friday night, and Shoto and Daido never entered a PvP zone unless it was absolutely necessary. The Distracted Globe was a famous zero-gravity dance club on the planet Neo-Noir in Sector 16. Ogden Morrow had coded the place himself decades ago and was still its sole owner. I never visited the Globe before. I wasn't much for dancing or for socializing with the twinked-out wannabe beater uber dorks who were known to frequent the place. But Og's birthday party was a special event, and so the usual clientele would be banished for the evening. Tonight, the club would be packed with celebrities, movie stars, musicians, and at least 2 members of the High Five. I spent over an hour tweaking my avatar's hair and trying on different skins to wear to the club. I finally settled on some classic 80s era attire, a light gray suit, exactly like the one Peter Weller wore in Buckaroo Banzai, complete with a red bow tie, along with a pair of vintage white Adidas high tops. I also loaded my inventory with my best suit of body armor and a large amount of weaponry. One of the reasons the Globe was such a hip, exclusive club was because it was located in a PvP zone, where both magic and technology function. So it was extremely dangerous to go there, especially for a famous beater like me. There were hundreds of cyberpunk-themed worlds spread throughout the Oasis, but Neo-Noir was one of the largest and oldest. Seen from orbit, the planet was a shiny onyx marble covered in overlapping spiderwebs of pulsating light. It was always night on Neo-Noir the world over, and its surface was an uninterrupted grid of interconnected cities packed with impossibly large skyscrapers. Its skies were filled with a continuous stream of flying vehicles whirring through the vertical cityscapes, and the streets below teemed with leather-clad NPCs and mirror-shaded avatars, all sporting high-tech weaponry and subcutaneous implants as they spouted city speak straight out of Neuromancer. Yo, business casual. The
Just
distracted.
presenting at the Game Awards.
Oh no! It really is. The distracted globe was located at the Western Hemisphere intersection of the Boulevard and the Avenue, two brightly lit streets that stretched completely around the planet along its equator and prime meridian. The club itself was a massive cobalt blue sphere, 3 kilometers in diameter. Floating 30 meters off the ground. A floating crystal staircase led up the club's only entrance, a circular opening at the bottom of the sphere. I made a big entrance when I arrived in my flying DeLorean, which I'd obtained by completing a Back to the Future quest on the planet Zemicus. The DeLorean came outfitted with a non-functioning flux capacitor, but I made several additions to its equipment and appearance. First, I'd installed an artificially intelligent onboard computer named Kit, purchased in an online auction, into the dashboard, along with a matching red Knight Rider scanner just above the DeLorean's grill. Then I outfitted the car with an oscillation overthruster, a device that allowed it to travel through solid matter. Finally, to complete my 80s super vehicle theme, I slapped a Ghostbuster logo on each of the DeLorean's gull-wing doors, then added personalized plates that read Ecto 88. I've had it only a few weeks now, but my time-traveling, ghost-busting, night-riding, matter-penetrating DeLorean had already become my avatar's trademark. I knew that leaving my sweet ride parked in a PvP zone was an open invitation for some moron to try and boost it. The DeLorean had several anti-theft systems installed, and the ignition system was booby-trapped. Max Rockatansky style, so that if any other avatar tried to start the car, the plutonium chamber would detonate in a small thermonuclear explosion. But keeping my car safe wouldn't be a problem here in Neo-Noir. As soon as I climbed out of the DeLorean, I cast a shrink spell on it, instantly reducing it to the size of a matchbox car. Then, I put the DeLorean in my pocket. Magic zones had their advantages. Thousands of avatars were packed up against the velvet rope force fields that kept everyone without an invitation at bay. As I walked toward the entrance, the crowd bombarded me with a mix of insults, autograph requests, death threats, and tearful declarations of undying love. I had my body shield activated, but surprisingly, no one took a shot at me. I flashed the cyborg doorman my invitation, then mounted the long crystal staircase leading up into the club. Entering the distracted globe was more than a little disorienting. The inside of the giant sphere was completely hollow, and its curved interior surface served as the club's bar and lounge area. The moment you passed through the entrance, the laws of gravity changed. No matter where you walked, your avatar's feet always adhered to the interior of the sphere, so you could walk in a straight line or up to the top of the club, then back down the other side, ending up right back where you started. The huge open space in the center of the sphere served as the club's zero-gravity dance floor. You reached it by simply jumping off the ground like Superman taking flight, and then swimming through the air into the spherical zero-G groove zone. As you stepped through the entrance, I glanced up, or in the direction that was currently up to me at the moment, and took a long look around. The place was packed. Hundreds of avatars milled around like ants crawling around the inside of a giant balloon. Others were already out on the dance floor, spinning, flying, twisting, tumbling in time with the music, which thumped out of floating spherical speakers that drifted throughout the club. In the middle of all the dancers, a large clear bubble was suspended in space at the absolute center of the club. This was the booth where the DJ stood. Surrounded by turntables, mixers, decks, and dials, at the center of all that gear was the opening DJ, R2D2, hard at work, using his various robotic arms to work the turntables. I recognized the tune he was playing, the '88 remix of New Order's Blue Monday, with a lot of Star Wars droid sound samples mixed in. As I made my way to the nearest bar, the avatars I passed all stopped to stare and point in my direction. I didn't pay much notice because I was busy scanning the club for Arthremis. When I reached the bar, I ordered a Pangalactic Gargle Blaster from the female Klingon bartender and downed half of it. Then I grinned as R2 queued up another classic '80s tune, Union of the Snake. I recited out of the habit, Duran Duran, 1983. Not bad, Ace, said a familiar voice, speaking just loud enough to be heard over the music. I turned to see Arthur standing behind me. She was wearing evening attire, a gunmetal blue dress that looked like it was spray painted on. Her avatar's dark hair was styled in a page boy cut, perfectly framing her gorgeous face. She looked devastating. She shouted at the barkeep, Glamourangi on the rocks. I smiled to myself. Connor McLeod's favorite drink. Man, did I love this girl. She winked at me as her drink appeared. Then she clinked her glass against mine and downed its contents in one swallow. The chattering of the avatars around us grew in volume. Word that Parzival and Arthurimus were here, chatting each other at the bar. All was already spreading throughout the entire club. Wait, did I say that? Whatever. It's fine. Arthurimus glanced up at the dance floor, then back at me. So how about it, Percy? Feel like cutting a rug? I scowled. Not if you call me Percy. Shit. I mean, look. If I were to pronounce it correctly, that'd be kind of that'd be a little strange. I scowled. Not if
It's
you keep
true.
calling me
It's
Percy.
not on brand.
I can pronounce the Asianish things kind of right. Surely, right? I got that going for me. Surely. She laughed. Just then, the current song ended, and then the club grew silent. All eyes turned upward toward the DJ booth, where R2D2 was currently dissolving in a shower of light, like someone beaming out in an original Star Trek episode. Then, a huge cheer went up as a familiar gray haired avatar beamed in, appearing behind the turntables. It was Og. Hundreds of VidFeed windows materialized in the air all over the club. Each displayed a live close-up image of Og in the booth, so that everyone could see his avatar clearly. The old wizard was wearing baggy jeans, sandals, and a faded Star Trek The Next Generation t-shirt. He waved to the assembled and then queued up his first track, a dance remix of a Rebel Yell by Billy Idol. A cheer swept across the dance floor. I love this song, Arthur shouted. Her eyes darted up the dance floor. I looked at her uncertainly. What's wrong? She said with mock sympathy. Can't the boy dance? She abruptly locked into the beat, bobbing her head, gyrating her hips. Then she pushed off from the floor with both feet and began to float upward. Drifting toward the groove zone, I stared up at her, temporarily frozen, mustering my courage. All right, I muttered to myself. The hell? I bent my knees and pushed off hard from the floor. My avatar took flight, drifting upward and sliding alongside Arthurimus. The avatars who were already on the dance floor moved aside to clear a path for us, a tunnel leading to the center of the dance floor. I could see Og hovering in his bubble just a short distance above us. He was spinning around like a dervish, remixing the song on the fly while simultaneously adjusting the gravity vortex of the dance floor, so he was actually spinning the club itself like an ancient vinyl disc. Artemis winked at me, and then her legs melted together to form a mermaid's tail. She flapped her new tail fin once and shot ahead of me, her body undulating and thrusting in time with the machine gun beat as she swam through the air. Then she swam back around to face me, suspended and floating, smiling and holding out her hand, beckoning me to join her. Her hair floated in a halo around her head like she was underwater. When I reached her, she took my hand. As she did, her mermaid tail vanished and her legs reappeared, whirling and scissoring to the beat. Not trusting my instincts any further, I loaded up a piece of high-end avatar dance software called Travolta, which I downloaded and tested earlier that evening. The program took control of Parzival's movements, syncing them up with the music, and all 4 of my limbs were transformed into undulating cosine waves. Just like that, I became a dancing fool. Artemis's eyes lit up in surprise and delight, and she began to mirror my movements, the 2 of us orbiting each other like accelerated electrons. Then Artemis began shapeshifting. Her avatar lost its human form and dissolved into a pulsing, amorphous blob that changed its size and color in sync with the music. I selected the mirror partner option on my dance software and began to do the same. My avatar's limbs and torso began to flow and spin like taffy, encircling Artemis, while strange color patterns flowed and shifted across my skin. I looked like Plastic Man, as if he were tripping out of his mind on LSD. Then everyone else on the dance floor also began to shapeshift, melting into prismatic blobs of light. Soon, the center of the club looked like some otherworldly lava lamp. When the song ended, Og took a bow, then queued up a slow song, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. All around us, avatars began to pair up. I gave Artemis a courtly bow and stretched on my hand. She smiled and took it. I pulled her close, and we began to drift together. Og set the dance floor's gravity to a counterclockwise spin, making all of our avatars slowly rotate around the club's invisible central axis, like motes of dust floating around a snow globe. And then, just before I could stop myself, the words just came out. I'm in love with you, Artie. She didn't respond at first. She looked at me in shock as our avatars continued to drift in orbit around each other. Then, she switched to a private voice channel so no one could eavesdrop on our conversation. You aren't in love with me, Z, she said. You don't even know me. Yes, I do, I insist. I know you better than I've ever known anyone in my entire life. You only know what I want you to know. You only see what I want you to see. She placed a hand on her chest. This isn't my real body weight or my real face. I don't care. I'm in love with your mind, with the person you are. I couldn't care less about the packaging. You're just saying that, she said. There was unsteadiness in her voice. Trust me, if I ever let you see me in person, you would be repulsed. Why do you always say that? Because I'm hideously deformed, or I'm a paraplegic, or I'm actually 63 years old. Take your pick. I don't care if you're all 3 of those things. Tell me where to meet you, and I'll prove it. I'll get on a plane right now and fly to wherever you are. You know I will. She shook her head. You don't live in the real world, Z. From what you've told me, I don't think you ever have. You're like me. You live in this illusion. She motioned to our virtual surroundings. You can't possibly know what real love is. Don't say that. I was starting to cry and didn't bother hiding it from her. Is it because I told you I've never had a real...
Doofa, my guy.
What the Is it because I told you I never had a real girlfriend and that I'm a virgin? Because, of course not, she said. This isn't what this is about at all. Then what is it? Tell me, please. The hunt. You know that. We've both been neglecting our quest to hang out with each other. We should be focusing on finding the Jade Key right now. You can bet that's what Sorrento and the Sixers are doing, and everyone else. To hell with the competition and the egg, I shouted. Didn't you hear what I just said? I'm in love with you, and I want to be with you more than anything. She just stared at me, Or rather, her avatar stared blankly back at my avatar. Then she said, I'm sorry, Z. This is all my fault. I let this get way out of hand. It has to stop. What do you mean? What has to stop? I think we should take a break. Stop spending so much time together. I felt like I'd been punched in the throat. Are you breaking up with me? No, Z, she said firmly. I am not breaking up with you. That would be impossible because we were not together. There was suddenly venom in her voice. We've never even met. So then you're just going to stop talking to me? Yes. I think that would be for the best. For how long? Until the hunt is over. But Artie, that could take years. I realize that. And I'm sorry, but this is the way it has to be. So winning the money is more important to you than me? It's not about the money. It's about what I could do with it. Right. Saving the world. You're so fucking noble. Don't be a jerk, she said. I've been searching for the egg for over 5 years. So have you. Now we're closer than ever to finding it. I can't just throw my chance away. I'm not asking you to. Yes, you are, even if you don't realize it. The Cyndi Lauper song ended, and Og queued up another dance track. James Brown is Dead by LA Style. The club erupted in applause. I felt like a large wooden stake had been driven into my chest. Arthemis was about to say something more. Goodbye, I think, when we heard a thunderous boom directly up above us. At first, I thought it was Og train wrecking into a new dance track, but when I looked up and saw the large chunks of rubble tumbling at high speed onto the dance floor as Avatar scattered to get out of the way, a gaping hole had just been blasted in the roof of the club near the top of the globe, and a small army of Sixers was now pouring through it, swooping into the club on jetpacks, firing blaster pistols as they came. Total chaos broke out. Half of the avatars in the club swarmed toward the exit, while the other half drew weapons or began to cast spells, firing laser bolts, bullets, and fireballs back at the invading Sixers. There were more than 100 of them, all armed to the teeth. I couldn't believe the Sixers' bravado. Why would they be dumb enough to attack a room full of high-level beaters on their own turf? They might kill a few of us, but they were going to lose some or all of their own avatars in the process. And for what? Then I realized that most of the Sixers' incoming fire seemed to be directed at me and Arthemis. They were here to kill the two of us. The news that Arthemis and I were here must have hit the news feeds, and when Sorrento had learned that the top two gunters on the scoreboard were hanging out in an unshielded PvP zone, he must have decided that it was too juicy of a target to pass up. This was the Sixers' chance to take out their two biggest competitors in one shot. It was worth wasting 100 or so of their highest level avatars. I knew my own recklessness had brought them down on us. I cursed myself for being so foolish. Then I drew my blasters and began to unload them at the cluster of Sixers nearest to me, while also doing my best to dodge their incoming fire. I glanced over at Arthemis just in time to see her incinerate a dozen Sixers in the space of 5 seconds, using balls of blue plasma that she hurled out of her palms, while ignoring the steady stream of laser bolts and magic missiles ricocheting off her transparent body shield. I was taking heavy fire too. So far, my own body shield was holding up, but it wasn't going to last much longer. Failure warnings were already flashing on my display, and my hit point counter was starting to plummet. In seconds, the situation escalated into the largest confrontation I'd ever witnessed, and it already seemed clear that Arthemis and I were going to be on the losing side. I noticed the music still hadn't stopped. I glanced up at the DJ booth just in time to see it crack open as a great and powerful Og emerged from within. He looked really, really annoyed. You jerks think you can crash my birthday party? He shouted, his avatar over the club speaker array reverberating like the voice of God. The melee seemed to halt for a split second as all eyes turned to look at Og, who was now floating at the center of the dance floor. He stretched out his arms as he turned to face the onslaught of Sixers. A dozen tines of red lightning erupted from each of Og's fingertips, branching out in all directions. Each tine struck a different Sixer avatar in the chest while somehow arcing harmlessly around everyone else. In a millisecond, every single Sixer in the club was completely vaporized. Their avatars froze and glowed bright red for a few seconds, then simply vanished. I was awestruck. It was the most incredible display of power by an avatar I'd ever seen. Nobody bust into my joint uninvited, Og shouted, his voice echoing through the now silent club. The remaining avatars, the ones who hadn't fled the club in terror or been killed in the brief battle, let out a victorious cheer. Og flew back into the DJ booth, which closed up around him like a transparent cocoon. "Let's get this party going again, shall we?" he said, dropping a needle on a techno remix of Atomic by Blondie. It took a moment for the shock to wear off, but then everyone started to dance again. I looked around for Artemis, but she seemed to have vanished. Then I spotted her avatar flying out of the new exit. The Sixer attack had created. She stopped, hovered outside a moment, just long enough to glance back at me. What the? I'm on the spectrum. What the? Fucking bad mouthing me? Fucking rude? My computer woke me up just before sundown, and I began my daily ritual. "I'm up!" I shouted at the darkness. In the week since Artemis had dumped me, I'd had a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, so I disabled my alarm snooze feature and instructed the computer to blast "Waking Me Up Before You Go Go" by Wham. I loathed the song with every fiber of my being, and getting up was the only way to silence it. It wasn't the most pleasant way to start my day, but it got me going. The song cut off, and my haptic chair reshaped and reoriented itself, transforming from a bed back into its chair configuration, lifting me into a sitting position as it did so. The computer began to bring the lights up slowly, allowing my eyes to adjust. No outside light ever penetrated my apartment. The single window had once provided a view of the Columbus skyline, but I'd spray painted it completely black a few days after I moved in. I decided that everything outside the window was a distraction from my quest, so I didn't need to waste time staring at it. I didn't want to hear the outside world either, but I hadn't been able to improve the apartment's existing soundproofing, so I had to live with the muffled sounds of wind and rain and of street and air traffic. Even these could be a distraction. At times, I'd slip into a kind of trance, sitting with my eyes closed, oblivious to the passage of time, listening to the sounds of the world outside my room. I made several other modifications to the apartment for the sake of security and convenience. First, I replaced the flimsy door with a new airtight armor-plated vacuum-sealed war door. Whenever I needed something, food, toilet paper, new gear, I ordered it online and somebody brought it right to my door. Deliveries worked like this. First, the scanner mounted outside in the hallway would verify the delivery person's identity, and my computer would confirm that they were delivering something I'd actually ordered. Then, the outer door would unlock itself and slide open, revealing a steel-reinforced airlock about the size of a shower stall. The delivery person would place the parcel, pizza, or whatever inside the airlock and step back. The outer door would hiss shut and relock itself. Then the package would be scanned, x-rayed, and analyzed 8 ways from Wednesday. Its contents would be verified and delivery confirmation would be sent. Then I would unlock and open the inner door and receive my goods. Capitalism would inch forward without my actually having to interact face to face with another human being. Which was exactly how I preferred it. Thank you. The room itself wasn't much to look at, which was fine because I spent as little time looking at it as possible. It was basically a cube about 10 meters long on each side. A modular shower and toilet unit were embedded in one wall opposite the small ergonomic kitchen. I never actually used the kitchen to cook anything. My meals were all frozen or delivered. My microwave brownies were as close as I ever got to cooking. The rest of the room was dominated by my Oasis immersion rig. I'd invested every spare cent I had in it. Newer, faster, or more versatile components were always being released. So I was constantly spending large chunks of my eager income on upgrades. The crown jewel in my rig, of course, was my customized Oasis console, the computer that powered my world. I built it myself, piece by piece, inside a modded mirror black Odinware Sphere chassis. It had a new overclock processor that was so fast its cycle time bordered on precognition. And the internal hard drive had enough storage space to hold 3 digitized copies of everything in existence. I spent the majority of my time in my Shaptic Technologies HC5000 fully adjustable haptic chair. It was suspended by 2 jointed robotic arms anchored to my apartment's walls and ceilings. These arms could rotate the chair on all 4 axes, so when I was strapped into it, the unit could spin, flip, spin, or shake my body to create the sensation that I was falling, flying, or sitting behind the wheel of a nuclear-powered rocket sled hurtling at Mach 2 through a canyon on the 4th moon on Altair 6. The chair worked in conjunction with my Shaptic boot suit, a full-body haptic feedback suit. It covered every inch of my body from the neck down and had discrete openings so I could relieve myself without removing the
Designated shitting gamer chair?
You know, I have to give it to Ernest Klein. He really did think of everything.
He
A
knows what
true
gamers truly
he
want.
knows what gamers want. Yeah, he knows what really gets those gamers going. He really knows what those gamers want. The outside of the suit was covered with an elaborate exoskeleton, a network of artificial tendons and joints that could both sense and inhibit my movements. Built into the inside of the suit was a web-like network of miniature actuators that made contact with my skin every few centimeters. These could be activated in small or large groups for the purpose of tactile stimulation to make my skin feel things that weren't really there. They could convincingly simulate the sensation of a tap on the shoulder, a kick to the shin, or a gunshot in the chest. Built-in safety software prevented my rig from actually causing me any physical harm, so a simulated gunshot would actually feel more like a weak punch. I had an identical backup suit hanging in the Mosh Wash cleaning unit in the corner of the room. These 2 haptic suits made up my entire wardrobe. My old street clothes were buried somewhere in the closet collecting dust. On my hands, I wore a pair of state-of-the-art Okagami Idle Hands haptic data gloves. Special tactile feedback pads covered both palms, allowing the gloves to create the illusion that I was actually touching objects and surfaces that didn't actually exist. My visor was a brand new pair of Dynatro RLR 7800 Rec specs, featuring a top-of-the-line virtual retina display. The visor drew the Oasis directly onto my retinas at the highest frame rate and resolution perceptible to the human eye. The real world looked washed out and blurry by comparison. The RLR 7800 was not yet available to the plebeian masses prototype, but I had an endorsement deal from Dynatro, so they sent me free gear, shipped to me through a series of remailing services, which I used to maintain my anonymity. My Abound audio system consisted of an array of ultra-thin speakers mounted on the apartment's walls, floors, and ceiling, providing 360 degrees of perfect spatial pin-drop sound reproduction, and the Mjolnir subwoofer was powerful enough to make my back teeth vibrate. The Olfatrix smell tower in the corner was capable of generating over 2,000 discernible odors. A rose garden, salty ocean breeze, burning cordite, the tower could convincingly recreate all of them. It also doubled as an industrial strength air conditioner purifier, which was primarily what I used it for. A lot of jokers like to code really horrific smells into their simulations just to mess with people who own smell towers. So I usually left the odor generator disabled unless I was in part of an oasis where I thought being able to smell my surroundings might prove useful. On the floor, directly underneath my suspended haptic chair, was my Okugami runaround omnidirectional treadmill, where no matter where you go, there you are, was the manufacturer's slogan. The treadmill was about 2 meters square and 6 centimeters thick. When it was activated, I could run at top speed in any direction and never reach the edge of the platform. If I changed the direction, the treadmill will sense it, and its rolling surface would change direction to match me, always keeping my body near the center of its platform. This model was also equipped with built-in lifts and an amorphous surface so that it could simulate walking up inclines and staircases. You could also purchase an ACHD anatomically correct haptic doll if you wanted to have more intimate encounters inside the Oasis. ACHDs came in male, female, and dual sex models and were available with a wide array of options. Realistic latex skin, servo motor driven endoskeleton, simulated musculature, and all the attendant appendages and orifices one would imagine. Driven by loneliness, curiosity, and raging teen hormones, I purchased a mid-range ACHD, the Haptic Uber Betty, a few weeks after R3 stopped speaking to me. After spending several highly unproductive days inside a standalone brothel simulation called the Pleasure Dome, I'd gotten rid of the doll out of a combination of shame and self-preservation. I wasted thousands of credits, missed a whole week of work, and was on the verge of completely abandoning my quest for the egg when I confronted the grim realization that virtual sex, no matter how realistic, was really nothing more but a glorified, computer-assisted masturbation. Like, Joy just did. Joey actually did.
Blame her. This sucks.
That was a little bit much.
Oh my god.
I just had to lose myself in the reading, and it's easy to ignore all the awful things he's describing.
You are but the voice.
I am but the speaker by which I present the show.
Oh my god.
I felt no shame about masturbating. Thanks to Anorak's Almanac, I now thought of it as a normal bodily function, as necessary and natural as sleeping or eating. Oh no, don't out of context, no. Oh no. AA24187. I would argue that masturbation is the human animal's most important adaptation, the very cornerstone of our technological civilization. Our hands evolved to grip tools, alright, including our own. You see, thinkers, inventors, and scientists are usually geeks, and geeks have a heart. Are you kidding? What? What am I reading?
To just
Oh my god. And geeks have a harder time getting laid than anyone. Without the built-in sexual release valve provided by masturbation, it's doubtful that early humans would have ever mastered the secrets of fire or discovered the wheel. And you can bet that Galileo, Newton, and Einstein never would have made their discoveries if they hadn't first been able to clear their heads by slapping the salami or knocking a few protons off the old hydrogen atom. The same goes for Marie Curie. Before she discovered radium, you can be certain she first discovered the little man in the canoe. God, this is fucked up. This is actually kind of really fucked up. Like, as a passage, having written this, that's fucked up.
These are the true beliefs of Ernest Klein.
Like, is this supposed to be good? It just sounds like somebody who's legit like, yeah, I don't get any sex, but that's okay. It's legit. It's just insult. It's legit just insult thinking. What the fuck? It's actual incel thinking.
Like, this is actually
Jesus.
wild.
Editors, publishers approved of this. Editors and publishers approved of this.
How much dirt do you think Ernest Klein has on them? The editors and the publishers to get this published?
None. They all wanted it to. They wanted to unleash it to the world. Their eyes bled. They wanted everybody else's to too.
Oh no.
It wasn't one of Halliday's more popular theories, but I liked it. As I shuffled over to the toilet, a large flat screen monitor mounted on the wall switched on, and the smiling face of Max, my system agent software, appeared on the screen. I programmed Max to start up a few minutes after I turned on the lights, so I could wake up a little bit before he started jabbering to me. Good morning, Wade, Max stuttered cheerily. Rise and shine. Running system agent software was a little like having a virtual personal assistant, one that also functioned as a voice activated interface with your computer. System agent software was highly configurable with hundreds of pre programmed personalities to choose from. I programmed mine to look, sound, and behave like Max Headroom, the ostensibly computer generated star of a late 80s talk show, a groundbreaking cyberpunk TV series, and a slew of Coke commercials. Good morning, Max, I replied groggily. I think you mean good evening, Rumpelstiltskin. It's 7:18 p.m. Oasis Standard Time, Wednesday, December 30th. Max was programmed to speak with a slight electronic stutter. In the mid 80s, when the character of Max Headroom was created, computers weren't actually powerful enough to generate a photorealistic human figure, so Max had been portrayed by an actor, the brilliant Matt Frewer, who wore a lot of rubber makeup to make him look computer generated. But the version of Max now smiling at me on the monitor was pure software, the best simulated AI and voice recognition subroutines money could buy. I've been running a highly customized version of Max Headroom version 3.4.1 for a few weeks now. Before that, my system agent software had been modeled after the actress Erin Gray of Buck Rogers and Silver Spoon's fame, but she proved to be way too distracting, so I switched to Max. He was annoying at times, but he also cracked me up. He did a pretty decent job of keeping me from feeling lonesome too. As I stumbled into the bathroom module and emptied my bladder, Max continued to address me from a small monitor mounted above the mirror. Uh-oh, it appears you've sprung a leak, he said. Get a new joke, I said. Any news I should know about? Just the usual. Wars, rioting, famine, nothing that would interest you. Any messages? He rolled his eyes. A few. But to answer your real question, no. Arthremus still hasn't called or written you back, lover boy. I've warned you. Don't call me that, Max. You're begging to be deleted. Touchy, touchy. Honestly, Wade, when did you get so sensitive? I'll erase you, Max. I mean it. Keep it up, and I'll switch back to Wilma Deerling, or I'll try out the disembodied voice of Majel Barrett. Max made a pouty face and spun around to face the shifting digital wallpaper behind him, currently a pattern of multicolored vector lines. Max was always like this. Giving me grief was part of his pre-programmed personality. I actually sort of enjoyed it because it reminded me of hanging out with H. And I really missed hanging out with H. A lot. My gaze dropped to the bathroom mirror, but I didn't much like what I saw there, so I closed my eyes until I finished urinating. I wondered, not for the first time, why I hadn't painted the mirror black too when I'd done the window. The hour or so after I woke up was my least favorite part of each day because I spent it in the real world. That was when I dealt with the tedious business of cleaning and exercising my physical body. I hated this part of the day because everything about it contradicted my other life. My real life inside the Oasis, the sight of my tiny one room apartment, my immersion rig, or my reflection in the mirror, they all served as a harsh reminder that the world I spent my days in was not, in fact, the real one. Retract chair, I said as I stepped out of the bathroom. The haptic chair instantly flattened itself again, then retracted so that it was flush against the wall, clearing a large empty space in the center of the room. I pulled up my visor and loaded up the gym, a standalone simulation. Now, I was standing in a large modern fitness center lined with exercise equipment and weight machines, all of which could be perfectly simulated by my haptic suit. I began my daily workout. Sit-ups, stomach crunches, push-ups, aerobics, weight training. Occasionally, Max would shout out words of encouragement. Get those legs out, you sissy! Feel the burn! I usually got a little exercise while logged into the Oasis by engaging in physical combat or by running around the virtual landscape on my treadmill. But I spent the vast majority of my time sitting in my haptic chair, getting almost no exercise at all. I also had a habit of overeating when I was depressed or frustrated, which was most of the time. As a result, I gradually started to put on some extra pounds. I wasn't in the best shape to begin with, so I quickly reached a point where I could no longer fit comfortably in my haptic chair or squeeze into my XL haptic suit. Soon, I would need to buy a new rig with components from the Husky line. I knew that if I didn't get my weight under control, I would probably die of sloth before I found the egg. I couldn't let that happen, so I made a snap decision and enabled the voluntary Oasis Fitness lockout software on my rig. I regretted it almost immediately. From then on, my computer monitored my vital signs and kept track of exactly how many calories I burned during the course of each day. If I didn't meet my daily exercise requirements, the system prevented me from logging into my Oasis account. This meant I couldn't go to work, continue my quest, or in effect, live my life. Once the lockout was engaged, you couldn't disable it for 2 months. And the software is bound to my Oasis account, so I couldn't just buy a new computer or go rent a booth in some public Oasis cafe. If I wanted to log in, I had no choice but to exercise first. This proved to be the only motivation I needed. The lockout software also monitored my dietary intake. Each day, I was allowed to select meals from a preset menu of healthy, low-calorie foods. The software would order the food for me online and it would be delivered to my door. Since I never left my apartment, it was easy for the program to keep track of everything I ate. If I ordered additional food on my own, it would increase the amount of exercise I had to do each day to offset my additional calorie intake. This was some sadistic software. But it worked. The pounds began to melt off, and after a few weeks, I was in near perfect health. For the first time in my life, I had a flat stomach and muscles. I also had twice the energy, and I got sick a lot less frequently. When the 2 months ended and I was finally given the option to disable the fitness lockout, I decided to keep it in place. Now, exercising was part of my daily ritual. Once I finished with my weight training, I stepped onto my treadmill. Begin morning run, I said to Max. Bifrost track. Bifrost? Bifrost? Whatever. I don't care. The virtual gym vanished. Now I was standing on a semi-transparent running track, a curved looping ribbon suspended in a starry nebula. Giant ringed planets and multicolored moons were suspended in space all around me. The running track stretched out ahead of me, rising, falling, and occasionally spiraling into a helix. An invisible barrier prevented me from accidentally running off the edge of the track and plummeting into the starry abyss. The Bifrost track was another standalone simulation, one of several hundred track designs stored on my console's hard drive. As I began to run, Max fired up my 80s music playlist. As the first song began, I quickly rattled off its title, artist, album, and year release from memory. A Million Miles Away, The Plimsouls, Everywhere at Once, 1983. Then I began to sing along, reciting lyrics. Having the right 80s song lyric memorized might save my avatar's life someday. When I finished my run, I pulled off my visor and began removing my haptic suit. This had to be done slowly to prevent damaging the suit's components. As I carefully peeled it off, the contact patches made tiny popping sounds as they pulled free of my skin, leaving tiny circular marks all over my body. Once I had the suit off, I placed it inside the cleaning unit and laid my clean spare suit out on the floor. Max had already turned on the shower for me, setting the water temperature right where I liked it. As I jumped in the steam-filled stall, Max switched the music over to my Shower Tunes playlist. I recognized the opening riffs of Change by John Waite from the Vision Quest soundtrack, Geffen Records, 1985. The shower worked a lot like an old car wash. I just stood there while it did most of the work, blasting me from all angles with jets of soapy water, then rinsing me off. I had no hair to wash because the shower also dispensed a non-toxic hair removing solution that I rubbed all over my face and body. This eliminated the need for me to shave or cut my hair, both hassles I didn't need. Having smooth skin also helped make sure my haptic suit fit smugly. I looked a little freaky without any eyebrows, but I got used to it. When the rinse jets cut off, the blow dryers kicked in, blasting the moisture off my skin in a matter of seconds. I stepped into the kitchen and took out a can of Sludge, a high-protein vitamin D infused breakfast drink to help counteract my sunlight deprivation. As I gulped it down, my computer sensors silently took note, scanning the barcode and adding the calories to my total for the day. With breakfast out of the way, I pulled on my clean haptic suit. This was less tricky than taking it off, but it still took time to do properly. Once I had the suit on, I ordered the haptic chair to extend. Then I paused, spent a moment staring at my immersion rig. I'd been so proud of all this high-tech gear when I first purchased it, but over the few months, I come to see my rig for what it was, an elaborate contraption for deceiving my senses to allow me to live in a world that didn't exist. Each component of my rig was a bar in the cell where I had willingly imprisoned myself. Standing there, under the bleak fluorescence of my tiny one-room apartment, there was no escaping the truth. In real life, I was nothing but an antisocial hermit, a recluse, a pale-skinned pop culture-obsessed geek, an agoraphobic shut-in with no real friends, family, or a genuine human contact. I was just another sad, lost, lonely soul, wasting his life on a glorified video game. But not in the Oasis. In there, I was the great Parzival, world famous beater, international celebrity. People asked for my autograph. I had a fan club, several actually. I was recognized everywhere I went, but only when I wanted to be. I was paid to endorse products. People admired and looked up to me. I got invited to the most exclusive parties. I went to all the hippest clubs and never had to wait in line. I was a pop culture icon, a VR rock star. And in beater circles, I was a legend. No, nay, a god. I sat down and pulled on my gloves and visor. Once my identity was verified, the Gregarious Simulation Systems logo appeared in front of me, followed by the login prompt. Greetings, Parzival. Please speak your passphrase. I cleared my throat and recited my passphrase. Each word appeared on my display as I said it. No one in the world ever gets what they want, and that is beautiful. There was a brief pause, and then I let out an involuntary sigh of relief as the oasis faded into existence all around me. My avatar slowly materialized in front of the control panel in my Stronghold's command center, the same spot where I'd been sitting the night before, engaged in my evening ritual of staring blankly at the quatrain until I drifted off to sleep and the system logged me out. I'd been staring at the damn thing for almost 6 months now, and I still hadn't been able to decipher it. No one had. Everyone had theories, of course, but the Jade Key still remained unfound, and the top rankings on the scoreboard remained static. My command center was located under an armored dome embedded in the rocky surface of my own private asteroid. From here, I had a sweeping 360-degree view of the surrounding cratered landscape, stretching to the horizon in all directions. The rest of my stronghold was below ground, in a vast subterranean complex that stretched all the way to the asteroid's core. I coded the entire thing myself shortly after moving to Columbus. My avatar needed a stronghold, and I didn't want any neighbors. So I bought the cheapest planetoid I could find, this tiny barren asteroid in Sector 14. Its designation was S14A316, but I renamed it Falco after the Austrian rap star. I wasn't a huge Falco fan or anything, I just thought it sounded like a cool name. Falco had only a few square kilometers of surface area, but it still cost me a pretty penny. It'd have been worth it though. When you owned your own world, you could build whatever you wanted there. And no one could visit it unless I granted them access. Something I never gave to anyone. My stronghold was my home inside the Oasis. My avatar sanctuary. It was the one place in the entire simulation where I was truly safe. As soon as my login sequence completed, a window popped up on my display informing me that today was an election day. Now that I was 18, I could vote in both the Oasis elections and the elections for US government officials. I didn't bother with the latter because I didn't see the point. The once great country into which I'd been born now resembled its former self in name only. It didn't matter who was in charge. Those people were rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic and everyone knew it. Besides, now that everyone could vote from home via the Oasis, the only people who could get elected were movie stars, reality TV personalities, or radical televangelists. I did take the time to vote in the Oasis elections, however, because their outcomes actually affected me. The voting process only took me a few minutes because I was already familiar with all of the major issues GSS put on the ballot. It was also time to elect the president and VP of the Oasis User Council, but that was a no-brainer. Like most beaters, I voted to re-elect Cory Doctorow and Wil Wheaton again. There were no term limits, and these two geezers had been doing a kick-ass job of protecting user rights for over a decade. When I finished voting, I adjusted my haptic chair slightly and studied the command console in front of me. It was crammed with switches, buttons, keyboards, joysticks, and display screens. A bank of security monitors on my left were linked to virtual cameras placed throughout the interior and exterior of my stronghold. To my right, another bank of monitors displayed all my favorite news and entertainment vid feeds. Among these was my own channel, Parzival TV, broadcasting obscure, eclectic crap 24/7, 365. Earlier that year, GSS had added a new feature to every Oasis user's account, the POV Personal Oasis Vid Feed channel. It allowed anyone who paid a monthly fee to run their own streaming television network. Anyone logged into the simulation could tune in and watch your POV channel from anywhere in the world. What you aired on your channel and who you allowed to view it were entirely up to you. Most users chose to run a voyeur channel, which was like being the star of your own 24-hour reality show. Hovering virtual cameras would follow your avatar around the Oasis as you went about your day-to-day activities. You could limit access to your channel so that only your friends could watch, or you could charge viewers by the hour to access your POV. A lot of second-tier celebrities and pornographers did this, selling their virtual lives at a per-minute premium. Some people use their POV to broadcast live video of their real-world selves, or their dog, or their kids. Some people programmed nothing but old cartoons. The possibilities were endless, and the variety of stuff available seemed to grow more twisted every day. Non-stop. Okay, really? You want to go after the foot fetishes? Fetishists? Really?
I mean, all of the insane shit that he said so far.
The foot people? Really? What they do?
They know what they did.
That's kind of fucked up, to be honest.
Yeah. They're so persecuted.
Honestly. Everyone just walks all over them, you know? It's really fucked up. It's really fucked up. Non-stop foot fetish videos broadcast out of Eastern Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe. Amateur porn featuring deviant soccer moms in Minnesota. You name it. Every flavor of weirdness the human psyche could cook up was being filmed and broadcast online. The vast wasteland of television programming had finally reached its zenith, and the average person was no longer limited to 15 minutes of fame. Now everyone could be on TV every second of every day, whether or not anyone was watching. Parzival TV wasn't a voyeur channel. In fact, I never showed my avatar's face in my vid feed. Instead, I programmed a selection of classic 80s TV shows, retro commercials, cartoons, music videos, and movies. Lots of movies. On the weekend, I showed old Japanese monster flicks, along with some vintage anime, whatever struck my fancy. It didn't really matter what I programmed. My avatar was still one of the high fives, so my vid feed drew millions of viewers every day, regardless of what I aired, and this allowed me to sell commercial time to my various sponsors. Most of Parzival TV's regular viewers were beaters who monitored my vid feed with the hope that I inadvertently reveal some key piece of information about the Jade Key or the egg itself. I never did, of course. At the moment, Parzival TV was wrapping up a non-stop 2-day Kikaider marathon. Kikaider was a late 70s Japanese action show about a red and blue android who beat the crap out of rubber-suited monsters in each episode. I had a weakness for vintage kaiju and tokusatsu shows like Spectre Man, The Space Giants, and Spider-Man. I pulled up my programming grid and made a few changes to my evening lineup. I cleared away the episodes of Riptide and Misfits of Science. I programmed and dropped in a few back-to-back flicks starting in Gamera, my favorite giant flying turtle. I thought they should be real crowd pleasers. Then, to finish off the broadcast day, I added a few episodes of Silver Spoons. R3Miss also ran her own VidFeed channel, R3 Vision, and I always kept one of my monitors tuned to it. Right now, she was airing her usual Monday evening fare, an episode of Square Pegs. After that would be Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, followed by back-to-back episodes of Isis and Wonder Woman. Her programming lineup hadn't changed in ages, but it didn't matter. She still got killer ratings. Recently, she'd also launched her own wildly successful clothing line for full-figured female avatars under the label R3Miss. She was doing really well for herself. After that night in the Distracted Globe, R3Miss had cut off all contact with me. She blocked all of my emails, phone calls, and chat requests. She also stopped making posts to her blog. I tried everything I could think of to reach her. I sent her avatar flowers. I made multiple trips to her avatar stronghold in Armored Palace in Benatar, the small moon she owned. I dropped mixtapes and notes on her palace from the air, like lovesick bombs. Once, in a supreme act of desperation, I stood outside her palace gates for 2 solid hours with a boombox over my head blasting In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel at full volume. He didn't come out. I don't even know if she was home. I've been living in Columbus for over 5 months now, and it had been 8 long, torturous weeks since I'd last spoken to R3Miss. But I hadn't spent that time moping around and feeling sorry for myself. Well, not all of it, anyway. I tried to enjoy my new life as a world-famous sector-hopping beater. Even though I'd maxed out my avatar's power level, I continued to complete as many quests as possible to add to my already impressive collections of weapons, magic items, and vehicles, which I kept in a vault deep within my stronghold. Questing kept me busy, served as a welcome distraction from the growing loneliness and isolation I felt. I tried to reconnect with H after R3Miss had dumped me, but things weren't the same. We'd grown apart, and I knew it was my fault. Our conversations were now stilted and reserved, as if we were both afraid of revealing some key piece of information the other might be able to use. I could tell he no longer trusted me. While I'd been off obsessing over R3Miss, the same H had been obsessed with being the first beater to find the Jade Key, but it had been almost half a year since we cleared the first gate, and the Jade Key's location still remained a mystery. I hadn't spoken to H in almost a month. My last conversation with him had devolved into a shouting match, which had ended when I reminded H that he never even would have found the copper key if I hadn't led him straight to it. He glared at me in silence for a second, then logged out of the chat room. Stubborn pride kept me from calling him back right away to apologize, and now it seemed like too much time had passed. Yeah, I was on a roll. In less than 6 months, I managed to wreck both of my closest friendships. I flipped over to H's channel, which he called the H feed. He was currently showing a WWF match from the late 80s featuring Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. I didn't even bother checking Dido and Shoto's channel, the Dai Show, because I knew they'd be showing some old samurai movie. That's all those guys ever showed. A few months after a confrontational first meeting in H's basement, I managed to form a tenuous friendship with Daido and Shoto when the three of us teamed up to complete an extended quest in Sector 22. It was my idea. I felt bad about how our first encounter had ended, and I waited for an opportunity to extend some sort of olive branch to the two samurai. It came when I discovered a hidden high-level quest called Showdown Urutoraman on the planet Tokusatsu. I hate this. I hate this so much right now. What the fuck? Really?
Just because they're Japanese, they can only do Japanese related content.
uh, the creation date in the quest colophon said it had been launched several years after Halliday's death, which meant it couldn't have any relation to the contest. It was also a Japanese language quest created by GSS's Hokkaido division. I could have tried to complete it on my own using the Mandarax real-time translator software installed in all Oasis accounts, but it would have been risky. Mandarax had been known to garble or misinterpret quest instructions and cues, which could easily lead to fatal mistakes. Daido and Shoto lived in Japan. They'd become national heroes there. And I knew that they both spoke Japanese and English fluently, so I contacted them to ask if they were interested in teaming up with me just for this one quest. They were skeptical at first, but after I described the unique nature of the quest and what I believed the payoff for solving it might be, they finally agreed. The three of us met outside the quest gate on Tokusatsu and entered it together. The quest was a recreation of all 39 episodes of the original Ultraman TV series, which had aired on Japanese television from 1966 to 1967. The show's storyline centered around a human named Hayada, who was a member of the Science Patrol, an organization devoted to fighting the hordes of giant Godzilla-like monsters that were constantly attacking Earth and threatening human civilization. When the Science Patrol encountered a threat they couldn't handle on their own, Hayada would use an alien device called a beta capsule to transform into an alien super being known as Ultraman. Then, he would proceed to kick the monster of the week's ass, using all sorts of kung fu moves and energy attacks. If I'd entered the gate by myself, I would have automatically played through the entire series storyline as Hayada, but because Shoto, Daido, and I had all entered at once, we were each allowed to select a different Science Patrol team member to play. We could then change or swap characters at the start of the next level or episode. The three of us took turns playing Hayada and his Science Patrol teammates Hoshino and Arashi. As with most quests in the Oasis, playing as a team made it easier to defeat the various enemies and complete each of the levels. It took us an entire week, often playing over 16 hours a day, before we were finally able to clear all 39 levels and complete the quest. As we stepped out of the quest gate, our avatars were each awarded a huge amount of experience points and several thousand credits. But the real prize for completing the quest was an incredibly rare artifact, Hayada's beta capsule. The small metal cylinder allowed the avatar who possessed it to transform into Ultraman once a day for up to 3 minutes. Since there were 3 of us, there was a debate over who should be allowed to keep the artifact. Parzival sure have it, Shoto had said, turning to his older brother. He found quests. We would even have known about it were it not for him. Of course, Daido would disagree, and he would not have been able to complete the quest without our help. He said the only fair thing to do would be to auction off the beta capsule and split the proceeds. But there was no way I could allow that. The artifact was too valuable to sell, and I knew it would end up in the hands of the Sixers, because they purchased nearly every major artifact that went up for auction. I also saw this as an opportunity to get on Daisho's good side. You two should keep the beta capsule, I said. Urutoraman is Japan's greatest superhero. His powers belong in Japanese hands. They were both surprised and humbled by my generosity, especially Daido. Thank you, Parzival-san, he said, bowing low. You are a man of honor. After that, the 3 of us had parted as friends, if not necessarily allies, and I consider that an ample reward for my efforts. A chime sounded in my ear, and I checked the time. It was almost 8 o'clock. Time to make the donuts. I was always hard up for cash, no matter how frugal I tried to be. I had several large bills to pay each month, both in the real world and in the Oasis. My real world expenses were pretty standard: rent, electricity, food, water, hardware repairs and upgrades. My my avatar's expenses my avatar's expenses were far more exotic: spacecraft repairs, teleportation fees, power cells, ammunition. I purchased my ammo in bulk, but it still wasn't cheap. And my monthly teleportation expenses were often astronomical. My search for the egg required constant travel, and the GSS kept raising the teleportation fees. I'd already spent all my remaining product endorsement dough. Most of it went toward the cost of my rig and buying my own asteroid. I earned a decent amount of money each month by selling commercial time on my POV channel and by auctioning off any unneeded magic items, armor, or weapons I acquired during my travels. But my primary source of income was my full time job doing Oasis technical support. When I created my new Bryce Lynch identity, I'd given myself a college degree, along with multiple technical certifications and a long sterling work record as an Oasis programmer and app developer. However, despite my sterling bogus resume, the only job I'd been able to get was as a Tier 1 tech support representative at Helpful Help Desk Inc., one of the contract firms GSS used to handle Oasis customer service and support. Now that I work 40 hours a week, helping morons reboot their Oasis consoles and update the drivers for their haptic gloves, it was grueling work, but it paid the rent. I logged out of my own Oasis account, then used my rig to log into a separate Oasis account I'd been issued for work. The login process was completed, and I took control of a happy helpdesk avatar, a cookie cutter Ken doll that I used to take tech support calls. The avatar appeared inside a huge virtual call center, inside a virtual cubicle, sitting at a virtual desk in front of a virtual computer, wearing a virtual phone headset. I thought of this place as my own private virtual hell. Helpful Help Desk Inc. took millions of calls a day from all over the world, 24/7, 365. One angry, befuddled cretin after another. There was no downtime between calls because there were always several hundred morons in the call queue, all of them willing to wait on hold for hours to have a tech rep hold their hand and fix their problem. Why bother looking up the solution online? Why try to figure out the problem on your own when you could have someone else do your thinking for you? As usual, my 10-hour shift passed slowly. It was impossible for helpdesk avatars to leave their cubicles, but I found other ways to pass the time. My work account was rigged, so I couldn't browse outside websites, but I hacked my visor to allow me to listen to music or stream movies off my hard drive while I took calls. When my shift finally ended and I logged out of work, I immediately logged back into my own Oasis account. I had thousands of new email messages waiting, and I could tell just by their subject lines what had happened while I'd been at work. Arthremus had found the Jade Key. Like other beaters around the globe, I'd been dreading the next change on the scoreboard. Because I knew it was going to give the Sixers an unfair advantage. A few months after we'd all cleared the first gate, an anonymous avatar had placed an ultra powerful artifact up for auction. It was called Findoro's Tablet of Finding, and it had unique powers that could give its owner a huge advantage in the hunt for Halliday's Easter egg. Most of the virtual items in the Oasis were created by the system at random, and they would drop when you killed an NPC or completed a quest. The rarest such items were artifacts, super powerful magic items that gave their owners incredible abilities. Only a few hundred of these avatars existed, and most of them dated back to the earliest days of the Oasis, when it was still primarily an MMO game. Every artifact was unique, meaning that only one copy of it existed in the entire simulation. Usually, the way to obtain an artifact was to defeat some godlike villain at the end of a high level quest. If you got lucky, the bad guy would drop an artifact when you killed him. You could also obtain an artifact by killing the avatar who had one in its inventory, or by purchasing one in an online auction. Since artifacts were so rare, It was always big news when one went up for auction. Some had been known to sell for hundreds of thousands of credits depending on their powers. The record had been set 3 years ago when an artifact called the Cataclysm was auctioned off. According to its auction listing, the Cataclysm was a sort of magical bomb, and it could only be used once. When it was detonated, it would kill every single avatar and NPC in the sector, including its owner. There was no defense against it. If you were unlucky enough to be in the same sector when it went off, you were a goner, regardless of how powerful or well protected you were. The Cataclysm had sold to an anonymous bidder for just over 1 million credits. The artifact still hadn't been detonated, so its new owner had it sitting around somewhere, waiting for the right time to use it. It was something of a running joke now. When a beater was surrounded by avatars she didn't like, she would claim to have the Cataclysm in her inventory and threaten to detonate it. But most people suspected that the item had actually fallen into Sixer hands, along with countless other powerful artifacts. Findoro's Tablet of Finding wound up selling for even more than the Cataclysm. According to the auction description, the tablet was a flat circle of polished black stone, and it had one very simple power. Once a day, its owner could write any avatar's name on its surface, and the tablet would display that avatar's location at that exact moment. However, this power had range limitations. If you were in a different Oasis sector than the avatar you were trying to find, the tablet would would tell you only which sector your target was currently in. If you are already in the same sector, the tablet would tell you what planet your target was currently on, or closest to if they're out in space. If you're already on the same planet as your target when you use the tablet, it would show you their exact coordinates on a map. As the artifact seller made sure to point out in his auction listing, if you use the tablet's power in conjunction with the scoreboard, it arguably became the most valuable artifact in the entire Oasis. All you had to do was watch the top rankings on the scoreboard and wait until someone's score increased. Once that happened, you could write that avatar's name on the tablet and it would tell you where they were at that exact moment, thus revealing the location of the key they just found or the gate they just exited. Due to the artifact's range limitations, it might take 2 or 3 attempts to narrow down the exact location of a key or gate, but even so, that was still information a lot of people would be willing to kill for. When Findoro's Tablet of Finding went up for auction, a huge bidding war broke out between several of the large Gunter clans. But when the auction finally ended, the tablet wound up selling to the Sixers for almost 2 million credits. Sorrento himself used his own IOI account to bid on the tablet. He waited until the last few seconds of the auction and then outbid everyone. He could have bid anonymously, but he obviously wanted the world to know who now possessed the artifact. It was also his way of letting those of us in the high five know that from that moment forward, whenever one of us found a key or cleared a gate, the Sixers would be tracking us, and there was nothing we could do about it. At first, I was worried the Sixers would also try to use the tablet to hunt down each of our avatars and kill us one at a time, but locating our avatars wouldn't do them any good unless we happened to be in a PvP zone at the time, or were stupid enough to stay put until the Sixers could reach us. And since the tablet could only be used once a day, they would also run the risk of missing their window of opportunity if the scoreboard changed on the same day they tried to use the tablet to locate one of us. They didn't take the chance. They kept the artifact in reserve and waited for their moment. Less than half an hour later, less than half an hour after Arthremis's score increase, the entire Sixer fleet was spotted converging on Sector 7. The moment the scoreboard changed, the Sixers had obviously used Findoro's Tablet of Finding to try and ascertain Arthremis's exact location. Luckily, the Sixer avatar using the tablet, probably Sorrento himself, happened to be in a different sector from Arthremis, so the tablet didn't reveal what planet she was on. It only told the Sixers which sector she was currently in, and so the entire Sixer fleet had immediately hightailed it to the Sector 7. Thanks to their complete lack of subtlety, The whole world now knew the Jade Key must be hidden somewhere in that sector. Naturally, thousands of beaters began to converge on it. The Sixers had narrowed the search area for everyone. Luckily, Sector 7 contained hundreds of planets, moons, and other worlds, and the Jade Key could have been hidden on any one of them. I spent the rest of the day in shock, reeling at the news that I'd been dethroned. That was exactly how the newsfeed headlines put it. Parzival dethroned. Arthremis new number 1. Beaters, Sixers closing in. Once I finally got a grip, I pulled up the scoreboard and made myself stare at it for a solid 30 minutes while I mentally berated myself. You've got no one to blame but yourself, I told myself. You let your success go to your head. You slacked off on your research. What? You think lightning would strike twice, then eventually you just stumble across the clue you needed to find the Jade Key? Sitting in first place all that time gave you a false sense of security. But you don't have that problem now, do you, asshead? No, because instead of buckling down and focusing on your quest like you should have, you pissed away your lead. You wasted almost half a year screwing around and pining over some girl you've never even met in person. The girl who dumped you. The same girl who's going to end up beating you. Now, get your head back in the game, moron. Find that key. Suddenly, I wanted to win the contest more than ever, not just for the money. I wanted to prove myself to Arthremis, and I wanted the hunt to be over so that she would talk to me again, so that I could finally meet her in person, see her true face, and try to make sense of how I felt about her. I cleared scoreboard off my display and opened up my Grail diary, which had grown into a vast mountain of data containing every scrap of data I'd collected since the contest began. It appeared as a jumble of cascading windows floating in front of me, displaying text, maps, photos, and audio and video files, all indexed, cross-referenced, and pulsing with life. I kept the quatrain open in a window that was always on top. 4 lines of text, 24 words, 34 syllables. I'd stared at them so often and for so long that they nearly lost all meaning. Looking at them again now, I had to resist the urge to scream in rage and frustration. The captain conceals the Jade Key in a dwelling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected. I knew the answer was right there in front of me. Arthremis had already figured it out. I read over my notes about John Draper, aka Captain Crunch, and the toy plastic whistle that had made him famous in the annals of hacker lore. I still believe that these were the captain and whistle Halliday was referring to, but the rest of the quatrain's meaning remained a mystery. But now I possessed a new piece of information. The key was somewhere in Sector 7, so I pulled up my Oasis Atlas and began to search for planets with names I thought might somehow be related to the quatrain. I found a few worlds named after famous hackers like Woz and Mitnick, but none named after John Draper. Sector 7 also contained hundreds of worlds named after old Usenet news groups, and on one of these, the planet Alt.Freaking, there was a statue of Draper posing with an ancient rotary phone in one hand and a Captain Crunch whistle in the other. But the statue had been erected 3 years after Halliday's death, so I knew it was a dead end. I read through the quatrain again, and this time the last 2 lines jumped out at me. But you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected. Trophies. Somewhere in Sector 7. I need to find a collection of trophies in Sector 7. I did a quick search of my files on Halliday. From what I could tell, the only trophies he'd ever owned were the 5 Game Designer of the Year awards he'd won back around the turn of the century. These trophies were still on display in the GSS Museum in Columbus, but there were records of them on display inside the Oasis on a planet called Arcade. And Arcade was located in Sector 7. The connection seemed thin, but I still wanted to check it out. At the very least, it would make me feel like I was doing something productive for the next few hours. I glanced over at Max, who was currently doing the samba on one of my command center's monitors. Max, prep the Vonnegut for takeoff, if you're not too busy. Max stopped dancing and smirked at me. You got it, El Comanchero. I got up and walked over to my Stronghold's elevator, which I modeled after the turbolift on the original Star Trek series. I rode down 4 levels to my armory, a massive vault filled with storage shelves, display cases, and weapon racks. I pulled up my avatar's inventory display, which appeared as a classic paper doll diagram of my avatar, onto which I could drag and drop various items and pieces of equipment. Arcade was located in a PvP zone, so I decided to upgrade my gear and wear my Sunday best. I put on my gleaming plus 10 Hail Mail powered armor, then strapped on my favorite set of blaster pistols and slung a pump action pistol grip shotgun across my back, along with a plus 5 Vorpal bastard sword. I also grabbed a few other essential items: an extra pair of anti-grav boots, a ring of magic resistance, an amulet of protection, some gauntlets of giant strength. I hated the idea of needing something and not having with me, so I usually ended up carrying enough equipment for 3 beaters. When I ran out of room on my avatar's body, I stored the additional gear in my backpack of holding. Once I was properly outfitted, I hopped back on the elevator, and a few seconds later, I arrived at the entrance of my hangar, located on the bottom level of my stronghold. Pulsing blue lights lined the runway, which ran up the center of the hangar to a massive pair of armored doors at the far end. The doors opened into a launch tunnel, which led into a matching set of armored doors set into the asteroid's surface. Standing on the left side of the runway was my battle-worn X-Wing fighter. Parked on the right side was my DeLorean. Sitting on the runway itself was my most frequently used spacecraft, the Vonnegut. Max had already powered up the engines, and they emitted a low, steady roar that filled the hangar. The Vonnegut was a heavily modified Firefly-class transport vessel, modeled after the Serenity in the classic Firefly TV series. The ship had been named the Kaylee when I'd first obtained it, but I immediately rechristened it after one of my favorite 20th century novelists. Its new name was stenciled on the side of its battered gray hull. I looted the Vonnegut from a cadre of Overraptor clansmen who had foolishly attempted to hijack my X-Wing while I was cruising through a large group of worlds in Sector 11 known as the Whedonverse. The Overraptors were cocky bastards with no clue who it was they were messing with. I was in a foul mood even before they'd opened fire on me. Otherwise, I probably would have just evaded them by jumping to lightspeed. But that day, I decided to take their attack personally. Ships were like most items in the Oasis. Each one had specific attributes, weapons, and speed capabilities. My X-Wing was far more maneuverable than the Overraptor's large transport ship, so it was no trouble for me to avoid the barrage from their aftermarket guns while I bombarded them with laser bolts and proton torpedoes. After I disabled their engines, I boarded the ship and proceeded to kill every avatar there. The captain tried to apologize when he saw who I was, but I wasn't in a forgiving mood. After I dispatched the crew, I parked my X-Wing in the cargo hold and then cruised home in my new ship. As I approached the Vonnegut, the loading ramp extended to the hangar floor. By the time I reached the cockpit, the ship was already lifting off. I heard the landing gear retract with a thud just as I seated myself at the controls. Max, lock up the house and set a course for Arcade. Aye, Captain, Max stuttered from one of the cockpit monitors. The hangar door slid open and the Vonnegut rocketed out of the launch tunnel and up into the starry sky. As the ship cleared the surface, the armored tunnel doors slammed closed behind it. I spotted several ships camped out in a high orbit above Falco, the usual suspects: crazed fans, wannabe disciples, and aspiring bounty hunters. A few of them, the ones currently turning to follow me, were tagalongs, people who spent most of their time trying to tail prominent beaters and gather intel on their movements so they could sell the information later. I was always able to lose these idiots by jumping to lightspeed, a lucky thing for them. If I couldn't lose someone who's trying to tail me, I usually had no choice but to stop and kill them. As the Vonnegut made the jump to light speed, each of the planets on my view screen became a long streak of light. Light speed engaged, Captain, Max reported. ETA to Arcade is estimated at 53 minutes. 15 if you want to use the nearest Stargate. Stargates were strategically located throughout each sector. They were really just giant spaceship-sized teleporters, but since they charged by the mass of your ship and the distance you wanted to travel, they were normally only used by corporations or extremely wealthy avatars with credits to burn. I was neither, but under the circumstances, I was willing to splurge a little. Let's take the Stargate, Max. We're kind of in a hurry. The Vonnegut dropped out of light speed, and an arcade suddenly filled the cockpit view screen. It stood out from other planets in the area because it wasn't coded to look real. All the neighboring planets were perfectly rendered, with clouds, continents, or impact craters covering their curved surfaces, but Arcade had none of these features because it was home to the Oasis's large classic video game museum, and its appearance had been designed as a tribute to the vector graphic games of the late 70s and early 80s. The planet's only surface feature was a web of glowing green dots similar to the ground lights on an airport runway. They were spaced evenly across the globe in a perfect grid so that from orbit, Arcade resembled a vector graphic Death Star from Atari's 1983 Star Wars arcade game. As Max piloted the Vonnegut down to the surface, I prepared for the possibility of combat by charging up my armor and buffing my avatar with several potions and nanopacks. Arcade was both a PvP zone and a chaos zone, which meant that both magic and technology functioned here. So I made sure to load all of my combat contingency macros. The Vonnegut's perfectly rendered steel loading ramp lowered to the ground, standing out in sharp contrast against the digital blackness of Arcade's surface. As I stepped off the ramp, I tapped a keypad on my right wrist. The ramp retracted, and there was a sharp hum as the ship's security system activated. A transparent blue shield appeared around the Vonnegut's hull. I gazed around at the horizon, which was just a jagged green vector line denoting mountainous terrain. Here, on the surface, Arcade looked exactly like the environment of the 1981 game Battlezone, another vector graphic classic from Atari. In the distance, a triangular volcano spewed green pixels of lava. You could run toward that volcano for days and never reach it. It always remained at the horizon. Just like in an old video game, the scenery never changed in Arcade, even if you circumnavigated the globe. Following my instruction, Max had set the Vonnegut down in a landing lot near the equator in the eastern hemisphere. The lot was empty, and the surrounding area appeared deserted. Headed towards the nearest green dot. As I approached, I could see it was actually the mouth of an entrance tunnel, a neon green circle 10 meters in diameter leading below ground. Arcade was a hollow planet, and the museum exhibits were all located beneath the surface. As I approached the nearest tunnel entrance, I heard loud music emanating from below. I recognized the song as Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard off their Hysteria album, Epic Records, 1987. I jumped the edge of the glowing green ring and jumped in. As my avatar plummeted down into the museum, the green vector graphic theme disappeared and I found myself in high resolution, full color surroundings. Everything around me looked completely real once again. Below its surface, Arcade housed thousands of classic video arcades, each one a loving recreation of an actual arcade that once existed somewhere in the real world. Since the dawn of the Oasis, thousands of elderly users had come here and painstakingly coded virtual replicas of local arcades they remember from their childhood, thus making them a permanent part of the museum. And each of these simulated game rooms, bowling alleys, and pizza joints was lined with classic arcade games. There was at least one copy of every coin-operated video game ever made down here. The original ROMs were all stored in the Planet's Oasis code, and their wooden game cabinets were coded to look like the antique originals. Wait, shit. Hundreds of shrines and exhibits devoted to various game designers and publishers were also scattered throughout the museum. The museum's various levels were comprised of vast caverns linked by a network of subterranean streets, tunnels, staircases, elevators, escalators, ladders, slides, trapdoors, and secret passageways. It was like a massive underground, multi-level labyrinth. The layout made it extremely easy to get lost, so I kept a three-dimensional holographic map on my display. My avatar's present location was indicated by a flashing blue dot. I'd entered the museum next to an old arcade called Aladdin's Castle, close to the surface. I touched a point on the map near the core of the planet, indicating my destination, and the software Software mapped the quickest route for me to get there. I ran forward, following it. The museum was divided into layers. Here, near the planet's mantle, you could find the last coin-operated video games ever made. From the first few decades of the 21st century, these were mostly dedicated simulator cabinets with first-generation haptics, vibrating chairs, tilting hydraulic platforms, lots of network stock car simulations that allowed people to race each other. These games were the last of their kind. By that era, home video game consoles had already made most coin-op games obsolete. After the Oasis went online, they stopped making them altogether. As you ventured deeper into the museum, the games grew older and more archaic. Turn-of-the-century coin-ops, lots of head-to-head fighting games with blocky, polygon-rendered figures beating the crap out of each other on a large flat-screen monitor. Shooting games play with crude haptic light guns, dancing games. Once you reached the level below that, the games all began to look identical. Each was housed in a large rectangular wooden box containing a cathode picture tube with a set of crude game controls mounted in front of it. Use your hands and eyes and occasionally your feet to play these games. There were no haptics. These games didn't make you feel anything. The deeper I descended, the cruder the game graphics got. The museum's bottom level, located in the planet core, was a spherical room containing a shrine to the very first video game, Tennis for Two, invented by William Higginbotham in 1958. The game ran on an ancient analog computer and was played on a tiny oscilloscope screen about 5 inches in diameter. Next to it was a replica of an ancient PDP-1 computer running a copy of Space War, the second video game ever made, created by a bunch of students at MIT in 1962. Like most beaters, I'd already visited arcade a few times. I'd been to the core and played both Tennis for Two and Space War until I'd mastered both of them. Then I'd wander around the museum's many levels, playing games, looking for clues Halliday might have left behind, but I never found anything. I kept running farther and farther down until I reached the Gregarious Simulation Systems Museum, which was located just a few levels above the planet core. I'd been here once before too, so I knew my way around. There were exhibits devoted to all the GSS's most popular games, including several arcade ports of titles they'd originally released for home computers and consoles. It didn't take me long to find the exhibit where Halliday's 5 Game Designer of the Year trophies were displayed, next to a bronze statue of the man himself. Within a few minutes, I knew I was wasting my time here. The GSS Museum exhibit was coded so that it was impossible to remove any of the items on display, so the trophies could not be collected. I spent a few minutes trying in vain to cut one of them free from its pedestal with a laser welding torch before calling it quits. Another dead end. This whole trip had been a waste of time. I took one last look around and headed for the exit, trying not to let my frustration get the best of me. I decided to take a different route on my way back up to the surface, through a section of the museum I never fully explored on my previous visits. I wandered through a series of tunnels that led me to a giant cavernous chamber. It contained a kind of underground city comprised entirely of pizza joints, bowling alleys, convenience stores, and of course, video arcades. I wandered through the maze of empty streets, then down a winding back alley that dead-ended by the entrance of a small pizza shop. I froze in my tracks when I saw the name of the place. It was called Happy Time Pizza, and it was a replica of a small, family-run pizza joint that had existed in Halliday's hometown in the mid-1980s. Halliday appeared to have copied the code for Happy Time Pizza from his Middletown simulation and hidden a duplicate of it here in the arcade museum. What the hell was it doing here? I'd never seen existence mentioned in any of the other beater message boards or strategy guides. Was it possible no one had ever spotted it before now? Halliday mentioned Happy Time Pizza several times in the almanac, so I knew he had fond memories of this place. He'd often come here after school to avoid going home. The interior recreated the atmosphere of a classic 80s pizza parlor and video arcade in loving detail. Several NPC employees stood behind the counter, tossing dough and slicing pies. I turned on my Alpha Trix tower and discovered I could actually smell the tomato sauce. The shop was divided into two halves, the game room and the dining room. The dining room had video games in it as well. All of the glass top tables were actually sit-down arcade games known as cocktail cabinets. You could sit down and play Donkey Kong on the table while you eat your pizza. If I'd been hungry, I could have ordered a real slice of pizza at the counter. The order would have been forwarded to a pizza vendor near my apartment complex, the one I'd specified in my Oasis account's food service preference settings. Then, a slice would have been delivered to my door in a matter of minutes, and the cost, including tip, would have been deducted from my Oasis account balance. As I walked into the game room, I heard a Bryan Adams song blasting out of the speakers mounted on the carpeted walls. Bryan was singing about how everywhere he went, the kids wanted to rock. I pressed my thumb to a plate on the change machine and bought a single quarter. I scooped it out of the stainless steel tray and headed to the back of the game room, taking in all the simulation's little details. I spotted a handwritten note taped to the marquee of a Defender game. It read, "Beat the owner's high score and win a free large pizza." A Robotron game was currently displaying its high score list. Robotron allowed its all-time best players to enter entire sentences of text besides their score, instead of just their initials. And this machine's top dog, who uses Precious Victory space to announce that Vice Principal Runeberg is a total douchebag. I continued further into the dark electronic cave and walked up to a Pac-Man machine at the very back of the room, wedged between a Galaga and a Dig Dug. The black and yellow cabinet was covered with chips and scratches, and the garish side art was peeling. The Pac-Man games monitor was dark, and there was an out-of-order sign taped to it. Why would Halliday include a broken game in the simulation? Was this just another atmospheric detail? Intrigued, I decided to investigate further. I pulled the game cabinet out from the wall and saw that the power cord had been unplugged. I plugged it back into the wall socket and waited for the game to boot up. It seemed to work just fine. As I was shoving the cabinet back into place, I spotted something. At the top of the game, resting on the metal brace that held the glass marquee in place, was a single quarter. The date on the coin was 1981, the year Pac-Man had been released. I knew that back in the 80s, placing your quarter on a game's marquee was how you reserved the next turn on the machine. But when I tried to remove the quarter, it wouldn't budge, like it was welded in place. Weird. I slapped the out of order sign on the neighboring Galaga cabinet and looked up at the startup screen, which was listing off the game's villainous ghosts: Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde. The high score at the top of the screen was 3,333,350 points. Several things were strange about this. In the real world, Pac-Man machines didn't save their high score if they were unplugged. And the high score counter was supposed to flip over at 1 million points. But this machine displayed a high score of 3,333,350 points, just 10 points shy of the highest Pac-Man score possible. The only way to beat that score would be to play a perfect game. I felt my pulse quicken. I'd uncovered something here, some sort of Easter egg hidden inside this old coin-op video game. It wasn't the Easter egg, just an Easter egg, some sort of challenge or puzzle, one I was almost certain had been created and placed here by Halliday. I didn't know if it had anything to do with the J key. It might not be related to the egg at all, but there was only one way to find out. I would have to play a perfect game of Pac-Man. This was no easy feat. You had to play all 256 levels perfectly, all the way to the final split screen, and you had to eat every single dot Energizer, fruit, and ghost possible along the way without ever losing a single life. Less than 20 perfect games had been documented in the game's 60-year history. One of them, the fastest perfect game ever played, had been accomplished by James Halliday in just under 4 hours. He'd done it on an original Pac-Man machine located in the Gregarious Games break room. Because I knew Halliday loved the game, I had already done a fair amount of research on Pac-Man, but I never managed to play a perfect game. Of course, I never really made a serious attempt. Up until now, never had a reason to. I opened my Grail diary and pulled up all of the Pac-Man related data I'd ever collected. The original game code, the unabridged biography of the designer Toru Iwatani, every Pac-Man strategy guide ever written, every episode of the Pac-Man cartoon series, the ingredients per Pac-Man cereal, and of course, patterns. I had Pac-Man pattern diagrams out the wazoo, along with the hundreds of hours of archive video of the best Pac-Man players in history. I had already studied a lot of this stuff, but I skimmed over it again now to refresh my memory. Then I closed my Grail diary and studied the Pac-Man machine in front of me like a gunfighter sizing up an opponent. I stretched my arms, rolled my head and neck around my shoulders, and cracked my knuckles. When I dropped a quarter into the left coin slot, the game emitted a familiar electronic beep-whoop sound. I tapped the player 1 button, and the first maze appeared on the screen. I wrapped my right hand around the joystick and began to play, guiding my pizza-shaped protagonist through one maze after another. Waka 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 waka. My synthetic surroundings faded away as I focused on the game and lost myself in its ancient two-dimensional reality. Just as with Dungeons of Daggorath, I was now playing a simulation within a simulation, a game within a game. I had several false starts. I would play for an hour or even 2. Then I make one mistake and I'd have to reboot the machine and start all over. But now I was on my 8th attempt and I had been playing for 6 hours straight. I was rocking like Dawkins. This game had been Iceman perfect so far. 255 screens in and I still hadn't made a single mistake. I had managed to nail all 4 ghosts with every single power pill until the 18th maze when they stopped turning blue altogether. And I'd snag every bonus fruit, bird, bell, and key that appeared without dying once. I was having the best game of my life. This was it. I could feel it. Everything was finally falling into place. I had the glow. There was a spot in each maze just above the starting position where it was possible to hide Pac-Man for up to 15 minutes. In that location, the ghosts couldn't find him. Using this trick, I've been able to take 2 quick food and bathroom breaks during the past 6 hours. As I chomped my way through the 255th screen, the song Pac-Man Fever began to blast out of the game room stereo. A smile crept onto my face. I knew this had to be a small tip of the hat from Halliday. Sticking to my tried and true pattern one last time, I whipped the joystick right, slid into the secret door, then out the opposite side and straight down to snag the last few remaining dots, clearing the board. I took a deep breath as the outline of the blue maze began to pulse white, and then I saw it staring me in the face, the fabled split screen, the end of the game. Then, in the worst case of bad timing imaginable, a scoreboard alert flashed on my display just a few seconds after I began to play through the final screen. The top 10 rankings appeared, superimposed over my view of the Pac-Man screen. And I glanced at them just long enough to see that H had now become the second person to find the Jade Key. His score had jumped 19,000 points, putting him in second place and knocking me into third. By some miracle, I managed not to flip out. I stayed focused on my Pac-Man game. I gripped the joystick tighter, refusing to let this wreck my concentration. I was nearly finished. I only had to milk the final 6,760 possible points from this last garbled maze, and then I would finally have the high score. My heart pounded in time with the music as I cleared the unblemished left half of the arena. Then I ventured into the twisted terrain of the right half, guiding Pac-Man through the pixelated on-screen refuse of the game's depleted memory. Hidden underneath all those junk sprites and garbled graphics were 9 more dots, worth 10 points each. I couldn't see them, but I had their locations memorized. I quickly found them, 8 all 9, gaining 90 more points. Then I turned and ran into the nearest ghost, Clyde, and committed Pac-icide, dying for the first time in the game. Pac-Man froze, and withered into nothingness with an extended mew. Each time Pac-Man died in this final maze, the 9 hidden dots reappeared on the D4 right half of the screen. So to achieve the game's maximum possible score, I had to find and eat each of these dots 5 more times, once with each of my 5 remaining lives. I did my best not to think about H, who I knew must be holding the J key at that very moment. Right now, he was probably reading whatever clue was etched onto its surface. I pulled the joystick to the right, weaving through the digital debris one final time. I could have done it blindfolded by now. I fish hooked around Pinky to grab the 2 dots near the bottom, then another 3 in the center, and then the last 4 near the top. I'd done it. I had the new high score, 3,333,360 points. A perfect game. I took my hands off the controls and watched as all 4 ghosts converged on Pac-Man. Game over, flashed in the center of the maze. I waited. Nothing happened. After a few seconds, the game's attract screen came back up, showing the 4 ghosts their names and their nicknames. My gaze shot to the quarter sitting on the edge of the marquee brace. Earlier, it had been welded in place, immovable. But now, it tumbled forward and fell end over end, landing directly in the palm of my avatar's hand. Then it vanished, and a message flashed on my display information informing me that the quarter had automatically been added to my inventory. When I tried to take it back out and examine it, I found that I couldn't. The quarter icon remained in my inventory. I couldn't take it out or drop it. If the quarter had any magical properties, they weren't revealed in its item description, which was completely empty. To learn anything more about the quarter, I would have to cast a series of high-level divination spells on it. That would take days and require a lot of expensive spell components. And even then, there was no guarantee the spells would tell me anything. But at the moment, I was having a hard time carrying all that much about the mystery of the undroppable quarter. All I could think about was that H and Arthremus had now both beaten me to the Jade Key. And getting the high score on this Pac-Man game on arcade obviously hadn't gotten me any closer to finding it myself. I really had been wasting my time here. I headed back down to the planet's surface. Just as I was sitting down in the Vonnegut's cockpit, an email from H arrived in my inbox. I felt my pulse quicken when I saw its subject line, Payback Time. Holding my breath, I opened the message and read it. Dear Parzival, you and I are officially even now. Got that? I consider my debt to you hereby paid in full. Better hurry. The Sixers must already be on their way here. Good luck, H. Below his signature was an image file he'd attached to the message. It was a high-resolution scan of the instruction manual cover for the text adventure game Zork. The version released in 1980 by Personal Software for the TRS-80 Model 3. I played and solved Zork once, a long time ago, back during the first year of the hunt. But I'd also played hundreds of other classic text adventure games that year, including all of Zork's sequels, and so most of the details of the game now had faded in my memory. Well, shit. Most old text adventure games were pretty self-explanatory, so I never actually bothered to read the Zork instruction manual. I now knew that this had been a colossal mistake. On the manual's cover was a painting depicting a scene from the game. A swashbuckling adventurer wearing armor and a winged helmet stood with a glowing blue sword raised over his head, preparing to strike a troll cowering before him. The adventurer clutched several treasures in his other hand, and more treasures lay at his feet, scattered among human bones. A dark, fanged creature lurked just behind the hero, glowering malevolently. All of this was in the painting's foreground, but my eyes instantly locked on what was in the background. A large white house with its front door and windows all boarded up. a dwelling long neglected. I stared at the image a few more seconds, just long enough to curse myself for not making the connection on my own months ago. Then I fired up the Vonnegut's engine and set a course for another planet in Sector 7, not far from Arcade. It was a small world called Frobos that was home to a detailed recreation of the game Zork. It was also, I now knew, the hiding place of the Jade Key. Frobos was located in a group of several hundred rarely visited worlds known as the Zizzy Cluster. These planets all dated back to the early days of the Oasis, and each one recreated the environment of some classic text adventure game or MUD multi-user dungeon. Each of these worlds was a kind of shrine, an interactive tribute to the Oasis's earliest ancestors. Well, later, Mel. Actually, we should probably just call it here for tonight then. I don't think we have that many people listening. We can just continue from here tomorrow.
All right. Good night.
Yep. I probably gotta. I mean, it's only 40%. We can do 20% we can do 40% in 2 days. That's easy enough. And then we get to move on to Ready Player 2. Okay, that's all for tonight. All right, and I'll be turning off the stream here, so we'll continue from part 23 tomorrow. Have a good night.